Some people knock politely. Clara Monroe didn't have that luxury. When she pounded on Daniel Reed's door at 10:45 on a Thursday night, soaked to the bone and clutching evidence of a betrayal that could destroy her career, she wasn't asking for a favor. She was fighting for survival. One photograph, one rumor, one corporate rival with a vendetta. That's all it took to weaponize a woman's personal life against her. But Clara made one critical mistake. She underestimated the quiet single father next door. She thought Daniel Reed was safe, invisible, controllable. She had no idea what he was capable of protecting. Before we dive into this story, if you're enjoying it, please hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's begin. The rain didn't just fall that Thursday night, it attacked. It hammered the roof of Daniel Reed's modest two-story home with the kind of relentless fury that made you question whether the shingles would hold. Inside, the sound was almost comforting, a white noise that drowned out the usual creaks and settling sounds of a house that had seen better decades. Daniel sat at his kitchen table, laptop open, reviewing structural calculations for a commercial project downtown. Numbers, angles, load-bearing specifications. This was his world. Predictable, quantifiable, safe. His daughter Emma, 7 years old with wild curls that refused any attempt at taming, had fallen asleep 2 hours ago, her nightlight casting soft shadows shaped like stars across her bedroom ceiling. Daniel worked best in these quiet hours, when the chaos of single parenthood gave way to the methodical rhythm of engineering. He reached for his coffee, cold now, but he drank it anyway, and was about to refocus on a particularly challenging beam calculation when the knocking started. Not the tentative tap of a neighbor needing to borrow sugar, not the apologetic rap of someone who knew it was late. This was sharp, controlled, urgent. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. Deliberate, almost aggressive. Daniel's first thought was Emma. Had something happened at school? Had he missed a call? But no. His phone sat silent beside his laptop. No missed notifications, no emergency alerts. He stood, his engineer's mind already calculating possibilities, filtering through scenarios. At 10:45 p.m., unexpected visitors meant problems. He crossed the living room in 6 strides, his bare feet silent on the hardwood floor he'd refinished himself 3 summers ago. Through the frosted glass panel beside his front door, he could make out a figure, smaller than him, hunched slightly against the rain. Female, he thought. The porch light caught the outline of long hair plastered against a skull, shoulders heaving with what might have been exertion or emotion or both. Daniel unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Clara Monroe stood on his doorstep like a woman who'd just survived a war and was preparing for another. Her designer blouse, silk, he noticed, probably expensive, clung to her frame, completely soaked through. Her dark hair, usually styled in that severe bun she wore to intimidate subordinates, hung in wet ropes around her face. Mascara had tracked down her cheeks in thin black lines. She was shaking, whether from cold or rage. Daniel couldn't immediately tell. But it was her eyes that stopped him from speaking. Clara Monroe had eyes that could slice through corporate boardrooms and reduce grown executives to stammering children. He'd seen her exactly 3 times in the 8 months since she'd moved into the house next door. Once when she'd moved in, once when he'd retrieved her Amazon package that had been misdelivered, and once when she'd asked him to sign for a certified letter while she was traveling. Each time, those eyes had been sharp, calculating, utterly in control. Now they were desperate. "I need your help," Clara said, her voice hoarse. She didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped forward, and Daniel, caught off guard by the sheer force of her presence, stepped back. She entered his home like she owned it, water dripping onto his floor, and thrust a single sheet of paper toward his chest. "I need you to read this. Right now." Daniel took the paper reflexively. It was a formal document, printed on heavy corporate letterhead. "Behavioral Concern Report," read the header in bold official font. He scanned the contents quickly, his engineer's brain processing the information in rapid sequence. Subject: Clara Monroe, Vice President of Strategic Development. Filed by Richard Garrett, Senior Vice President. Date: today's date. Concern category: Professional conduct and judgment. It has come to my attention that Ms. Monroe has been engaging in behavior that raises questions about her stability and judgment during this critical evaluation period for the Chief Strategy Officer position. Multiple sources have reported erratic personal decisions, concerning associations, and a pattern of instability that may impact her capability to lead at the executive level. The document continued for another half page, each sentence carefully worded to sound concerned rather than accusatory, professional rather than personal. It was a masterpiece of corporate warfare, nothing explicit enough to be actionable, everything damning enough to plant doubt. Daniel looked up from the paper to find Clara watching him with an intensity that made him deeply uncomfortable. "I don't understand," he said slowly. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because in 72 hours the board makes their final decision on the CSO position," Clara said, her voice tight and controlled despite the trembling in her hands. "It's between me and Richard Garrett, the bastard who filed this complaint, and Richard doesn't file anything without ammunition." She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen 3 times with fingers that shook slightly, and turned it toward Daniel. The image was grainy, clearly taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, but unmistakable. Clara, entering a downtown hotel bar at night, alone. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., 2 weeks ago. "That's the Meridian." Daniel recognized the brass fixtures in the background. So I was meeting a client," Clara said, her jaw tight. "A perfectly legitimate business dinner that ran late. But look at how it's framed. Look at the angle. Look at what they're implying without saying it." She swiped to another photo. This one showed her leaving the same hotel, slightly blurred, her jacket over her arm. Alone again, but the timestamp, 1:23 a.m., told a story that truth might not overcome. "Richard's been building a narrative," Clara continued, her voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "The unstable executive. The woman who can't be trusted with the top position because her personal life is chaos. He doesn't need facts, he needs implications. Whispers. Reasonable doubt in the minds of the board members." Daniel handed her phone back carefully. "That's horrible, but I still don't understand what this has to do with me." Clara's laugh was bitter, sharp enough to cut. "The board's annual gala is Saturday night. It's the final social evaluation before the decision. Every executive will be there with their spouse, their partner, their perfectly curated +1 that demonstrates stability, judgment, and appropriate life choices." Understanding began to dawn, cold and uncomfortable. "Clara, I need a date," she said bluntly. "Someone respectable, someone above reproach. Someone who makes me look stable and settled and completely incapable of the mess Richard is trying to paint me as." "Absolutely not. Daniel, I have a daughter sleeping upstairs," Daniel said firmly, keeping his voice low but unmovable. "I don't get involved in corporate politics. I don't do fake relationships. And I definitely don't let strangers drag me into whatever war you're fighting with your colleague." "You're not a stranger," Clara countered. "You're my neighbor. You're a single father with a beautiful child, a respectable career, 0 scandal attached to your name. You're exactly the kind of person who makes someone like me look like I make good decisions." The bluntness was almost refreshing in its honesty, even as it made Daniel's skin crawl. "So I'm a prop." "You're a solution," Clara corrected. She stepped closer, and Daniel caught the faint scent of expensive perfume mixed with rain and desperation. "I've spent 15 years building my career. 15 years of 80-hour weeks, of sacrificing relationships and sleep and any semblance of a personal life. I've earned this position. Richard wants it because he thinks he's entitled to it, and he's willing to destroy my reputation to get it." "Then fight him with the truth," Daniel said. "Expose his tactics. Go to HR, go to the board directly." "The truth is boring," Clara interrupted. "The truth is a woman who works too hard and doesn't have time for a social life. The truth is hotel bars where I meet clients and late nights at the office, and a perfectly legitimate but incredibly lonely existence. But the lie?" She gestured with her phone. "The lie is sexy. It's scandalous. It's a story the board members can tell themselves to justify promoting Richard instead. Well, we just had concerns about Clara's judgment, you understand." Daniel wanted to refuse again. Wanted to close the door on this woman and her corporate warfare and go back to his structural calculations where problems had clear solutions and ethics weren't situational. But something in Clara's eyes stopped him. Not the desperation, but something underneath it. Something that looked like the same exhaustion he saw in his own mirror every morning. Even if I wanted to help, he said carefully, I wouldn't know the first thing about these corporate events. I'd probably make it worse. You wouldn't. Clara's intensity softened slightly, just a fraction. You're exactly what I need. You're an engineer, stable, logical, respectable. You're a single parent, responsible, caring, absolutely not the kind of man who'd be involved with someone unstable. You're my neighbor, which gives us a built-in, believable story. We've been quietly seeing each other, nothing scandalous, just two professionals who connected. You've thought this through. I've thought about nothing else since Richard filed this complaint 8 hours ago. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Emma always said made him look like he was trying to rub thoughts directly into his brain. Saturday is in 2 days. I know. I'd need to arrange childcare. I can pay. I don't want your money, Daniel said sharply. Clara's mouth closed. If, and this is a massive if, I agreed to help you, it wouldn't be transactional. It would be because... He trailed off, searching for the right words. Because I know what it's like when the system is rigged against you, when people make assumptions based on circumstances rather than character. Clara's expression shifted, curiosity mixing with the desperation. What happened? Not relevant, Daniel said, deflecting. His own history wasn't up for discussion, especially not at 11 o'clock at night with a near stranger in his living room. But I need you to understand something. I have one absolute priority in my life, and she's asleep upstairs. Anything that risks her stability, her security, her happiness, that's a non-starter. If your corporate war spills over into my home, if Emma gets caught in any fallout, I'm out immediately. No negotiation. I would never... You can't promise that, Daniel interrupted. You don't control Richard or his tactics. You don't control what the board believes or what gossip spreads. All you can promise is that you'll do everything possible to keep my daughter out of it. Can you promise that? Clara held his gaze for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than before, almost vulnerable. Yes, I promise. Daniel studied her, this powerful executive standing in his living room dripping on his floor, and made a decision he suspected he'd regret. Okay, I'll help you, on one condition. Hope flashed across Clara's face. Anything. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to walk into a room full of corporate executives and sell them on the idea that we're together, we practice first. Here. Tonight. Clara blinked. Practice? You said it yourself. You need me to be convincing, to make you look stable and settled and like you make good decisions. But I'm an engineer who spends his evenings reviewing load calculations and his weekends at Emma's soccer games. I don't do galas, I don't do corporate theater, and I definitely don't know how to be someone's fake boyfriend. Understanding dawned on Clara's face, followed by something that might have been embarrassment. You want to rehearse. I want to not humiliate both of us in front of your entire company, Daniel corrected. Which means we need to look like we actually know each other, like we're comfortable together, like this isn't the most awkward arrangement in the history of professional networking. Clara's laugh was unexpected, genuine, and slightly hysterical. This is insane. Completely, Daniel agreed. But you knocked on my door, so here we are. Do you want my help or not? Clara looked at him for a long moment, and Daniel wondered what she saw. Not the polished executive she was used to commanding, certainly. Probably just a tired single dad in worn jeans and a faded university t-shirt, standing in a house that was clean but cluttered with the evidence of active parenting. Emma's art projects on the fridge, her backpack by the stairs, her sneakers kicked off near the door. Okay, Clara said finally. How do we start? Daniel glanced at the antique clock on his mantel, 11:03 p.m. Emma wouldn't wake before 7, which gave them hours if they needed it, though something told him this was going to be a very long night regardless. First, he said, you should probably change. You're soaking wet and you're going to catch pneumonia standing in my entryway. Clara looked down at herself as if just remembering the rain. I don't have... I'll find you something. Daniel headed toward the stairs, then paused. Fair warning. It's going to be my clothes, and they're not going to fit well, but they'll be dry. He didn't wait for her response, taking the stairs 2 at a time to his bedroom. In his closet, he found an old university sweatshirt, faded but clean, and a pair of sweatpants with a drawstring waist. Not elegant, not even particularly attractive, but functional. When he came back downstairs, Clara was standing exactly where he'd left her, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller and more uncertain than he'd ever seen her. "Bathroom's down the hall, second door on the left," Daniel said, handing her the clothes. "Take your time. I'll make coffee." Clara accepted the bundle without comment and disappeared down the hallway. Daniel heard the bathroom door close, the lock click, and then the sound of running water. He moved to his kitchen, methodically preparing coffee, the good stuff he saved for weekends, because if they were doing this insane thing, they might as well do it properly caffeinated. The coffee maker was gurgling when Clara emerged. Daniel's sweatshirt hung off her shoulders, the hem reaching nearly to her knees. The sweatpants were rolled up several times at the ankles. Her wet hair was wrapped in one of his hand towels. She looked absolutely ridiculous. She also looked more human than she had in their 3 previous interactions combined. "Better?" Daniel asked, pouring 2 mugs. "Warmer, at least." Clara accepted the coffee, wrapping both hands around the mug like it was a lifeline. "Thank you, for the clothes, for the coffee, for not slamming the door in my face." "The night's still young," Daniel said dryly, but he softened it with a small smile. "Come on, living room. We need to talk through the basics." They settled on opposite ends of his couch, a comfortable leather sectional he'd bought used 4 years ago and that Emma had already decorated with crayon marks on the underside of the cushions. Clara curled into the corner, coffee clutched in both hands, looking more like a college student than a vice president fighting for the biggest promotion of her career. "So," Daniel began, "tell me about us." Clara raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Our story," he clarified. "How did we meet? How long have we been seeing each other? What do we do together? If I'm going to sell this to your colleagues, I need details, believable details." Clara considered this, her lawyer's sharp mind clearly cataloging possibilities. "We met when I moved in 8 months ago. You helped me carry boxes." "I didn't, though." "They don't know that. But I'll know it," Daniel said. "And if I'm trying to remember a fake story, I'll hesitate. I'll look like I'm lying. We need something closer to the truth, something I can reference naturally." Clara frowned, thinking. "The Amazon package. You brought it over 3 months ago when it was delivered to your house by mistake." "Better," Daniel acknowledged. "What was in it?" "Books. Business strategy books." "That's boring. No one remembers business books." Daniel thought back to that day, accessing the memory with the same precision he used for structural specifications. It was heavy. Whatever was in that box, it was dense. "Collected works of historical fiction," Clara said suddenly. "First editions. I collect them." "Do you really?" "No, but I could. It's believable enough. Executive with a secret literary interest, single dad who appreciates reading." Clara was warming to the exercise now, her natural strategic thinking kicking in. "We started talking about books. You mentioned reading to Emma. I recommended something. You invited me for coffee to discuss it." "And you said yes?" Daniel made his voice skeptical. The high-powered executive who works 80-hour weeks made time for coffee with the neighbor? Clara's jaw tightened. "Fine. I said I was too busy. But you persisted. Not pushy, just consistent. You'd wave when you saw me leaving for work. You'd mention another book you'd read. Eventually I said yes to coffee just to stop feeling guilty about saying no." "When was this?" 6 weeks ago. We've been seeing each other quietly since then. Nothing serious, nothing public, just getting to know each other." Daniel tested the story in his mind, looking for holes. "Why keep it quiet?" "Because I'm in the middle of a career-defining evaluation period, and I didn't want anyone at work using my personal life as ammunition." Clara's voice turned bitter, which apparently didn't work anyway since Richard found something to weaponize regardless. "Okay," Daniel said slowly. "That works. That's actually pretty good. But there's a problem." "What problem?" "We don't know each other." Daniel gestured between them. "If we've supposedly been dating for 6 weeks, I should know basic things about you. Your coffee order, your music preferences, whether you're a morning person, what you do to decompress after a stressful day. These aren't things you can fake in the moment. They come from actual time spent together." Clara set her mug down with a sharp click. "We don't have time for actual time spent together. The gala is Saturday. Then we compress the timeline, Daniel said. Right now, tonight. We do a crash course in Clara Monroe and Daniel Reed, the quick version of 6 weeks of dating condensed into a few hours. That's impossible. So is walking into a corporate gala with a fake boyfriend and convincing everyone he's real, Daniel countered. But you're planning to do it anyway. At least this way we have a fighting chance of pulling it off. Clara studied him with those sharp executive eyes, and Daniel could practically see her running calculations, weighing options, measuring risk versus reward. Finally, she nodded. Okay. Where do we start? Coffee, Daniel said immediately. How do you take yours? Black, 2 sugars. Morning person or night owl? Night. I do my best work after midnight. Favorite food? I don't have time for favorite foods. I eat whatever is fastest. Daniel shook his head. Wrong answer. Everyone has a favorite food, even if it's something they never have time to eat. If I'm your boyfriend, I'd know what you order when you finally do take time for a meal. Claire's expression shifted, something defensive cracking just slightly. Thai food. There's a place near my office that does this incredible panang curry. I probably order from there twice a week. Better, Daniel said. Spice level? Medium. Hot enough to be interesting, not so hot I can't taste anything else. Favorite book? Clara hesitated. I told you, I don't actually collect historical fiction. I didn't ask what you collect, Daniel interrupted gently. I asked your favorite book, the one you've read multiple times, the one that meant something to you. For the first time since she'd burst through his door, Clara looked genuinely uncomfortable. Why does this matter? Because if we're selling the idea that we've been getting to know each other, I need to know you, the real you, not the vice president version, not the corporate warrior, the person underneath all that. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Clara, I'm helping you lie to your company about a relationship. The least we can do is base that lie on some actual truth about who you are. Clara was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. Jane Eyre. I read it first when I was 13. I've probably read it 20 times since then. Why that one? Because Jane doesn't apologize for who she is, Clara said simply. She doesn't diminish herself to make other people comfortable. She demands to be treated as an equal, even when the entire world tells her she should accept less. And in the end, she gets what she deserves. Not because someone gave it to her, but because she refused to settle for anything less. Daniel felt something shift in his understanding of the woman sitting across from him. You see yourself in her. I see who I'm trying to be. Clara met his eyes. Every day I walk into that office, I'm surrounded by men who think I should be grateful for the opportunity to compete for a position they believe should be theirs by default. I've had to be twice as smart, work twice as hard, and never show weakness or doubt or any hint that I might not be absolutely perfect for the role. One mistake, one photo, one rumor, one suggestion that my personal life is anything less than pristine, and all of that work disappears. That's not fair, Daniel said quietly. No, Clara agreed. It's not. But it's reality. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain still hammering the windows, the coffee cooling in their mugs. Daniel thought about his own experiences, the assumptions people made about single fathers, the questions about Emma's mother that he'd learned to deflect, the way some people looked at him with pity or suspicion depending on their prejudices. Different circumstances, same fundamental unfairness. My turn, he said finally. What do you want to know about me? Clara seemed surprised by the offer. I don't know. What should I know? Emma, Daniel said immediately. If you're supposed to be someone I've been seeing for 6 weeks, you'd have met her. You'd know the basics. She's 7, second grade, obsessed with dinosaurs despite everyone telling her that's a boy thing. She plays soccer, badly but enthusiastically. She has my late wife's curls and her own completely unique personality that alternately delights and terrifies me. Clara's eyes had widened. Your wife died? 4 years ago, car accident. Daniel kept his voice even, factual. This was information, not an invitation to sympathy. It was sudden. Emma was 3. She doesn't remember much about her mother, which breaks my heart. But it also means she's adjusted better than I probably have. I'm sorry, Clara said, and she sounded like she genuinely meant it. That must have been incredibly difficult. It is, but we manage. Daniel straightened slightly, redirecting. The point is, Emma's existence isn't a secret. If you're in my life, you know about her. You've probably met her at least once or twice. Maybe we had coffee here at the house and she came downstairs for breakfast. Maybe you saw us at the park one weekend. What would she think of me? Clara asked, and there was something vulnerable in the question. Daniel considered this honestly. She'd probably think you were intimidating at first. You have that executive presence that makes even adults nervous. But Emma's good at reading people. She'd see past that pretty quickly. She'd probably ask you a million questions about what you do for work and whether you've ever met a real CEO and do you get to fire people like on TV. Clara's laugh was unexpected, genuine. She sounds like a handful. She's the best handful of my life, Daniel said simply. And she's the reason I'm being very careful about this arrangement. If Emma meets you as my girlfriend, even fake girlfriend, and then you disappear after Saturday, that's going to raise questions I don't want to answer. So we need to be smart about this. We could say you're just a friend, Clara suggested, a neighbor who needed help with something. That's not technically lying to a 7-year-old. Better, Daniel agreed. And more manageable. Emma knows Miss Monroe from next door. We've waved to you. She's seen you coming and going. If you're here tomorrow night for practice and she happens to see you, we say you needed help with something and we're working on it together. Does that happen often? Neighbors helping each other with things? In Emma's world, yes. Everyone helps everyone. It's one of the benefits of having a kid. You're automatically part of a community of parents who trade favors and support. She won't question it. Clara nodded slowly, processing. Okay. What else should I know? What do you do to relax? What's your coffee order? Fair's fair. You interrogated me. Daniel smiled slightly. Black coffee, no sugar. I'm a morning person by necessity. Emma's an early riser. I relax by building things, furniture, repairs around the house, woodworking projects when I have time. I listen to classic rock when I work and NPR when I'm driving. My favorite food is actually Emma's attempt at making pancakes, which are usually burned on one side and raw in the middle. But she's so proud of them, I eat every bite. You really love being a dad, Clara observed. It's the only job that matters, Daniel said simply. Everything else, the engineering, the money, the career, it's all just infrastructure to support what really counts. Emma's happy, healthy, safe. That's success. Everything else is negotiable. Clara's expression was difficult to read. I don't think I've ever met anyone who actually believes that. Then you've been spending time with the wrong people. Apparently. Clara glanced at the clock, 11:47 p.m. We should probably practice the actual event, what it'll be like at the gala. Daniel followed her gaze and nodded. Okay. Describe it to me. Where is it? What's the format? Who will be there? The Grandview Hotel, ballroom level. Cocktail hour from 7 to 8, dinner from 8 to 10, dancing and networking after. About 200 people, the full executive team, senior management, board members and their spouses, major clients and partners. Black tie, formal seating, probably 6 to 8 people per table. Will we be sitting together? Yes. The seating is arranged by department and rank. As a VP, I'll be at one of the head tables with other senior executives. You'll be with me as my +1. Daniel's stomach twisted slightly at the mental image. So I'll be making conversation with other executives and their spouses. Probably. Is that going to be a problem? I don't know, Daniel admitted. I'm not great at small talk. I tend to be too direct, and corporate people usually find that off-putting. Direct is fine, Clara said. Better than fine, actually. It makes you seem genuine. Just avoid politics, religion, and anything controversial. Stick to safe topics. Emma, your work, sports if they bring it up, travel if you've gone anywhere interesting. I haven't. Emma and I went to the state park last summer for camping. That's the extent of my travel. Clara waved this off. That's perfect. Outdoor activities, father-daughter bonding, wholesome American values. The board members will eat it up. You make it sound calculated. Everything at these events is calculated, Clara said bluntly. That's the point. Everyone's performing. You're just performing as yourself, which is actually the easiest role to play. Daniel wasn't sure he agreed, but he let it go. What about physical contact? If we're supposed to be dating, people will expect us to be comfortable with each other. Hand-holding, maybe. Standing close. Clara's posture shifted, subtle but noticeable. Right, yes, that makes sense. You're uncomfortable, Daniel observed. I'm not, Clara started, then stopped. Maybe a little. I don't do casual physical affection. It's not part of my normal interactions. Even in relationships? Clara's laugh was brittle. I don't really have those either. My last actual relationship ended 3 years ago because he got tired of being the least important thing in my life. Since then, it's been work, just work. Daniel understood loneliness. He'd been living in it for 4 years, ever since Sarah died. But his loneliness was circumstantial, forced by tragedy. Clara's sounded chosen, strategic, a sacrifice made in service of ambition. Okay, he said gently. Then we need to practice that too. Being comfortable with each other physically. Because if you flinch every time I touch your hand, people will notice. Clara nodded stiffly. How do we do that? Start simple. Daniel stood, offering his hand. Stand up. Clara set down her mug and took his hand, her palm cold despite the warm coffee. She stood, and they were suddenly much closer than they'd been all evening, less than 2 feet apart, near enough that Daniel could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes. This is weird, Clara said. Extremely, Daniel agreed, but necessary. Okay, put your hand on my arm, like we're walking together. Clara's hand settled on his forearm with the tentative precision of someone defusing a bomb. Her fingers were still cold. Relax, Daniel said. We're supposed to look like we enjoy being near each other, not like I'm escorting you to an execution. Sorry. Clara's grip loosened slightly. This is harder than I thought. Because you're thinking of me as a stranger, Daniel said. Try thinking of me as, I don't know, a colleague you actually like, someone you're comfortable with. I don't really have colleagues I like, Clara admitted. Then think of me as a friend. I don't have many of those either. Daniel pulled back slightly, studying her. Clara, when was the last time you spent time with someone just because you wanted to? Not for networking, not for work, not for strategy. Just because being around them made you happy? Clara opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I honestly can't remember. The admission hung in the air between them, sad and honest and somehow damning. Daniel felt a surge of something that might have been pity or empathy or both. Okay, he said quietly. New approach. Close your eyes. What? Close your eyes, trust me. Clara looked skeptical, but after a moment she complied. Her eyelashes were longer than he'd realized, dark against her cheeks. Now, Daniel said softly, forget about the gala. Forget about Richard and the board and the promotion. Just focus on right now, this moment. We're 2 people standing in a living room at midnight, and neither of us has anywhere else we need to be. There's no performance, no agenda, just presence. He felt Clara's breathing slow, her shoulders dropping slightly. The tension in her hand eased. Better, Daniel murmured. Now imagine that we actually are friends, that we've had those 6 weeks of coffee and conversation and getting to know each other. Imagine that you trust me, that you feel safe here. I barely know you, Clara whispered. But you came to me for help, Daniel countered. Some part of you already trusts me. Find that part. Build on it. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly her grip on his arm shifted from mechanical to almost natural. Her body angled slightly toward his instead of maintaining rigid distance. Good, Daniel said. You can open your eyes. Clara did. They were standing closer now, her hand resting comfortably on his arm, her expression softer than he'd seen it all night. This isn't so bad, she said, sounding surprised. No, Daniel agreed. It's not. They stood like that for several heartbeats, neither moving, the rain continuing its assault on the windows. Then Clara's phone buzzed, loud and jarring in the quiet. She stepped back quickly, reaching for her pocket. Sorry, she muttered, pulling out the device. Her face paled as she read the screen. Oh, God. What is it? Clara turned the phone toward him. Another photo, this one time-stamped from 30 minutes ago. Clara entering Daniel's house, soaked and distressed. The message below it was from an unknown number. Interesting choice of crisis management. See you Saturday. Daniel felt cold settle in his stomach. Richard? Has to be. Or someone working for him. Claire's hand was shaking again. He's watching me. He's actually watching my house. That's illegal. It's also impossible to prove unless we catch him in the act, Clara interrupted. And by the time we could build a case, the board decision will be made and Richard will have won. Daniel looked at the photo again, studying the angle, the quality, the positioning. His engineering mind automatically calculated trajectories and sight lines. This was taken from the street, probably from a car. See the slight elevation? They were sitting in a vehicle shooting through the windshield or an open window. Does that matter? Maybe. If they're surveilling you from public property, there are still laws about harassment and stalking. But more immediately, if they're watching your house, they might see you leaving here in an hour. That gives them another photo, another piece of ammunition. Understanding dawned on Clara's face. I can't go home tonight. Not if you don't want to give Richard more material, no. They stared at each other, the implications settling between them. Clara's phone buzzed again, another message from the unknown number. Sleepover? How cozy. This keeps getting better. That decides it, Daniel said firmly. You're staying here. Daniel, not negotiable. You're right. If you leave now, you're giving them exactly what they want. More photos, more implications, more ammunition for their narrative, that you're unstable or inappropriate or whatever story they're trying to sell. He ran his hand through his hair, already planning logistics. I have a guest room. It's small and it's currently full of storage boxes, but there's a bed. You can stay there tonight, and in the morning, when Emma's awake, you're just the neighbor who needed help with something. Nothing scandalous, nothing inappropriate. Clara looked like she wanted to argue, but then her phone buzzed a third time. She glanced at it and her jaw tightened. She didn't show Daniel the screen. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. Come on, Daniel said, heading for the stairs. I'll clear out the guest room. And tomorrow, he paused, looking back at her. Tomorrow, we finish preparing for Saturday. Because now it's not just about the gala. It's about showing Richard that whatever game he's playing, you're not intimidated. Clara followed him upstairs, and as Daniel started moving boxes and clearing space, he wondered what exactly he'd just agreed to. He'd meant to help a neighbor with a temporary problem. Instead, he'd apparently enlisted in a corporate war. And somewhere in the darkness outside, someone was watching. Waiting. Taking notes. Daniel pushed the thought aside and focused on making the bed with fresh sheets. One problem at a time. First, give Clara a safe place to sleep. Then, prepare for the gala. And hope that 2 days was enough time to make a fake relationship look real enough to fool 200 executives and save a career from a rival's vendetta. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. Morning came with the kind of cruel brightness that made last night's drama feel almost dreamlike. Daniel woke at 6:30 to the sound of Emma's feet thundering down the hallway, her voice calling out with the particular urgency only a 7-year-old could muster before 7 a.m. Dad! Dad! There's a lady in the guest room! Daniel sat up so fast his head spun, memories of the previous night flooding back in sharp detail. Clara. The complaint. The photos. The promise to help. He'd been so focused on clearing the guest room and getting Clara settled that he'd completely forgotten to prepare Emma for the possibility of a morning encounter. Emma, wait! He called, but she was already at his bedroom door, eyes wide with the kind of delighted curiosity that meant questions were inevitable and numerous. Who is she? Why is she here? Is she your girlfriend? Does this mean we're getting a mom? Slow down, Daniel said, swinging his legs out of bed and reaching for the t-shirt he'd draped over his chair. Come here, let me explain. Emma bounced onto his bed with the energy of someone who'd slept soundly and was ready to interrogate. Daniel sat beside her, choosing his words carefully. Lying to his daughter wasn't an option, but the full truth was too complicated for a second grader. That's Miss Monroe from next door, he said, She had a problem last night and needed help, so she stayed in the guest room, that's all. What kind of problem? Grown-up work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Emma's expression suggested she was unconvinced, but willing to accept the explanation for now. Can I meet her? Maybe later. Right now, let's let her sleep, okay? She had a rough night. Daniel stood, guiding Emma toward the door. How about you get dressed for school, and I'll make pancakes? Can I make them? Daniel thought of Clara potentially emerging to find his kitchen covered in batter and eggshells. How about we make them together? They compromised on Emma cracking the eggs while Daniel handled the actual cooking, a system that minimized mess while maximizing her sense of participation. They were halfway through their second batch when Clara appeared in the doorway, still wearing Daniel's sweatshirt and looking distinctly uncomfortable. Emma spotted her first. Hi, you're the lady from the guest room. Emma, Daniel warned gently, but Clara surprised him by smiling, small and tentative, but genuine. Hi, Clara said. You must be Emma. I'm Clara. I know, you live next door. I've seen you leaving for work. You wear really fancy clothes and really tall shoes. Emma studied Clara with the blunt assessment children excelled at. Why are you wearing Dad's sweatshirt? Because my clothes got wet in the rain last night, Clara explained, moving further into the kitchen with careful steps, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. Your dad was kind enough to let me borrow something dry. Oh. Emma processed this, then brightened. Do you want pancakes? Dad's making them, but I helped crack the eggs. Only one got shells in it this time. That's very impressive, Clara said seriously, and Daniel caught the hint of genuine interest in her voice. I would love some pancakes. Thank you. They ate breakfast in the kind of awkward domesticity that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. Emma dominated the conversation, asking Clara about her job in that relentless way children had of cutting through professional polish to get to interesting details. Clara answered carefully at first, then with increasing ease, until she was explaining corporate strategy using Emma's dinosaur toys as visual aids. So the T-Rex is the CEO, Emma said, moving her favorite toy to the center of the table. And all these other dinosaurs work for him? Exactly. And my job is to help the T-Rex figure out the best way to lead all the other dinosaurs so everyone succeeds. What if the T-Rex is mean? Clara's smile was sharp. Then you find a better T-Rex. Daniel watched this exchange while washing dishes, struck by how natural Clara looked sitting at his kitchen table in oversized sweats, debating corporate hierarchy with a second grader. It was such a stark contrast to the desperate executive who'd pounded on his door 12 hours ago that he almost couldn't reconcile them as the same person. At 7:45, the school bus arrived with its familiar honk. Emma grabbed her backpack, hugged Daniel goodbye, then surprised both adults by hugging Clara too. Bye, Ms. Monroe. I hope your work problem gets fixed. Me too, Clara said softly, and there was something in her expression, vulnerability, maybe, or gratitude, that made Daniel's chest tighten. The door closed behind Emma, and suddenly the house felt very quiet. Clara stood in the entryway, arms wrapped around herself, looking lost. Thank you, she said finally, for letting me stay, for breakfast, for not making this more awkward than it had to be. Emma has that effect, Daniel said. She makes everything simpler just by being herself. She's wonderful. You're lucky. I know. Daniel gestured toward the living room. We should talk about tonight. Clara followed him, settling back into her corner of the couch, while Daniel took his usual spot. In daylight, with coffee and the normalcy of morning routine behind them, the previous night's intensity felt slightly absurd. But then Clara pulled out her phone and showed him 3 more messages that had arrived overnight, each with a photo. Clara's car in his driveway, lights on in his guest room, her silhouette visible through the curtains. He's relentless, Daniel said, anger building in his chest. This is harassment. This is corporate warfare, Clara corrected, and I can't prove Richard's behind it. The number's blocked, the photos could be from anyone, and even if I could trace them, all it proves is that someone took pictures from a public street. Not illegal, just creepy. So what do? We stick to the plan. Saturday night, we show up together, we're convincing, and we give the board absolutely no reason to question my judgment or stability. Clara's voice was steady, controlled, the executive armor back in place. Which means we need to continue what we started last night. We need to actually know each other well enough to sell this. Daniel checked his watch. 8:15. He had a client call at 9 and project reviews in the afternoon, but his evening was clear. I can do tonight. 6 o'clock? That gives me time to finish work and get Emma settled with dinner. 6 works. Clara stood, already pulling out her phone to check messages. I should go home, change, get to the office. I have meetings all day. Clara. Daniel stood too, moving to block her path to the door. Be careful. If Richard's watching your house, he got what he wanted last night. Photos of me at your place looking distressed. He's probably analyzing them right now, building his narrative. Her smile was bitter. Let him watch me go home this morning. Let him think I'm rattled. It'll make Saturday's appearance even more effective when I show up completely composed with you on my arm. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to insist she take this more seriously, but he recognized the steel in her voice. This was Clara in executive mode, and she didn't accept protection or caution easily. Fine, he said. But tonight, we do this properly. No phones, no distractions, no corporate emergencies. We focus completely on preparation. Agreed. Clara moved past him toward the door, then paused. Daniel, thank you, really. I know this is asking a lot. We'll get through it, Daniel said, surprised to find he meant it. See you at 6. Clara left through the front door with her head high, the borrowed sweatshirt and pants somehow not diminishing her dignity. Daniel watched from the window as she crossed the lawn to her house, keys already in hand, moving with purpose despite the absurdity of her outfit. A dark sedan was parked 3 houses down, engine running. As Clara entered her house, the sedan pulled away slowly. Daniel memorized the license plate automatically, his engineer's brain cataloging details even as his gut churned with unease. This was bigger than he'd anticipated, more dangerous. And somehow, he'd put himself directly in the middle of it. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Daniel forced himself through client calls and technical reviews, but his mind kept drifting to Clara, to the photos, to the growing certainty that Richard Garrett wasn't just playing dirty. He was playing to win at any cost. At 3:30, Daniel picked Emma up from school and brought her to Mrs. Patterson next door, a retired teacher who watched Emma occasionally when Daniel needed evening work time. Emma went willingly, especially when she learned Mrs. Patterson had just baked cookies. Will the lady from breakfast be coming back? Emma asked as Daniel was leaving. Ms. Monroe? Maybe. We're working on her problem together. I like her, Emma announced. She explained things good, and she didn't talk to me like I was a baby. Well, Daniel corrected automatically. Well, what? She explained things well, not good. Emma rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair she'd recently perfected. Whatever. Can she come to my soccer game tomorrow? Daniel felt his stomach drop. He'd completely forgotten about Emma's game. Sweetie, Miss Monroe is very busy with work. But if she's your friend, friends come to soccer games. That's the rule. There was no arguing with 7-year-old logic, especially when it was technically correct. I'll ask her. No promises. He made it home by 5:45 and used the remaining 15 minutes to straighten the living room and make fresh coffee. At exactly 6 o'clock, there was a knock on his door. Controlled, professional, nothing like last night's desperate pounding. Clara stood on his doorstep transformed. Gone was the bedraggled executive in borrowed clothes. This Clara wore tailored black pants, a cream silk blouse, and heels that added 3 inches to her height. Her hair was pulled back in that severe bun, makeup perfect, every inch the powerful vice president. Hi, she said, and Daniel caught the nerves underneath the polish. Hi, come in. He stepped aside and Clara entered with the same careful precision she'd shown that morning. Coffee? Please. They settled into what was becoming their routine. Opposite ends of the couch, coffee in hand, the rain from last night replaced by clear evening light filtering through the windows. Clara pulled out a leather portfolio, all business. I made notes, she said, flipping it open. Topics we might encounter, people you should know about, background on the company culture. Clara. Daniel set down his coffee. Put the portfolio away. She looked up, startled. What? Why? Because you're doing the thing again. What thing? The executive thing, the performance, the armor. Daniel leaned forward slightly. You're treating this like a business presentation. But Saturday night, I'm not your colleague or your employee. I'm supposed to be someone you care about, someone who sees past all this. He gestured at her outfit, her portfolio, her perfect composure. Clara's jaw tightened. This is who I am. No, Daniel said gently. This is who you have to be at work. It's not who you were this morning, sitting at my kitchen table explaining corporate structure to my daughter using dinosaur toys. That was real. That was you. That was inappropriate. That was human, Daniel interrupted. And that's what we need Saturday, not the vice president, the person underneath. Because that's who I would actually date. That's who I would actually care about. Clara stared at him for a long moment, conflict warring across her features. Then, slowly, she closed the portfolio and set it aside. I don't know how to do this without the armor. Then we practiced taking it off, piece by piece. Daniel stood, offering his hand. Starting now. Come here. Clara took his hand hesitantly and let him pull her to her feet. They stood facing each other close enough that Daniel could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle that probably cost more than his monthly grocery budget. Okay, he said. We're at the gala. Cocktail hour just ended, dinner's about to start. We've been mingling separately, you with colleagues, me probably hiding near the bar. Now we find each other across the room. What happens? Clara's brow furrowed. I come over to you? Show me. She took a step back, then forward again, her movement stiff and uncertain. Daniel shook his head. You're walking like you're approaching a business meeting. Try again. This time, imagine you're actually happy to see me. Imagine I'm the one person in that entire room you actually want to talk to. Clara reset, considered, then walked toward him again. This time, there was a slight softening in her expression, a barely perceptible relaxation in her shoulders. Better, Daniel said. But you're still thinking too much. Here, let's try something different. Close your eyes. Again with the closing eyes? It worked last night. Trust the process. Daniel waited until Clara complied. Now, imagine the gala, but instead of focusing on the board members and Richard and the promotion, focus on the sensory details. What does the room smell like? Clara was quiet for a moment. Expensive perfume, candles, whatever's being served for dinner. What do you hear? Conversation, clinking glasses, maybe music. They usually hire a string quartet for these things. Good. Now imagine you've been making small talk for an hour. You're tired of performing, tired of being watched, tired of measuring every word. Then you see me across the room. What do you feel? Clara's expression shifted, subtle but noticeable. Relief. Why? Because you're the only person there who doesn't want anything from me, who isn't judging whether I'm good enough for the promotion or calculating what my presence means for their own career. You're just there, safe. Perfect. Daniel's voice was soft. Hold on to that feeling. Now open your eyes and walk toward me like I'm that relief, like I'm the safe place in a room full of performance. Clara opened her eyes and moved toward Daniel, and this time it was completely different. Her stride was still confident, but there was warmth in it now, genuine pleasure in her expression. When she reached him, she didn't stop at a professional distance. She stepped close, natural, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Much better, Daniel said, and he meant it. That's what we need. That's real. That actually felt real, Clara admitted, sounding surprised. Because you stopped performing and started feeling. Emotion first, action second. That's what sells authenticity. Daniel took her hand, lacing their fingers together experimentally. How does this feel? Weird, Clara said honestly, but less weird than last night. We'll keep practicing until it's not weird at all. Daniel guided her hand to rest on his chest, right over his heart. Saturday night, when we're standing together, this is going to be natural, comfortable, not something you have to think about. Clara's palm was warm through his shirt, her breathing slightly uneven. What if I can't do it? What if I freeze up or say something wrong or... Then I'll be there, Daniel said simply. That's the whole point. You're not doing this alone. When you're uncertain, you look at me. When you need a moment to breathe, I give you an out. I suggest we get drinks, or step outside for air, or dance. We're a team. I'm not good at teams. You were good with Emma this morning. Clara's smile was small but genuine. Emma's easy. She doesn't have ulterior motives. Neither do I, Daniel reminded her. I'm helping you because it's the right thing to do. Because the system is rigged against you and someone should be on your side. That's it. No hidden agenda. Why? The question came out raw, vulnerable. Why are you really doing this? You barely know me. You have nothing to gain and potentially a lot to lose if this goes wrong. So why? Daniel considered the question seriously. 4 years ago, when Sarah died, everyone had opinions about how I should grieve, about whether I could handle raising Emma alone, about whether I should move or change jobs or find someone new quickly so Emma would have a mother figure. Everyone thought they knew what was best for my life better than I did. He paused, memories surfacing that he usually kept locked away. There was one person, a family court judge actually, who questioned whether I should have full custody. Said single fathers couldn't provide the same stability as a traditional family structure. Said Emma would be better off with Sarah's parents, who could give her a 2-parent household. Clara's intake of breath was sharp. What happened? I fought. I provided evidence of my capabilities, my financial stability, my support system. I documented every way I was meeting Emma's needs, and eventually the judge backed down. But I've never forgotten what it felt like to have someone with power make assumptions about my character based on circumstances rather than facts. Understanding dawned in Clara's eyes. Richard's doing the same thing to me. Exactly. He's weaponizing your personal life, or lack thereof, to undermine your professional capabilities, and that's garbage. You've earned this promotion. You shouldn't have to defend your relationship status to get what you've worked for. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. So that's why I'm helping, because I've been where you are, and I know how much it matters to have someone in your corner. Clara was quiet for a long moment, her eyes suspiciously bright. Thank you, she said finally, voice thick. That means more than you know. You're welcome. Now, shall we continue? They spent the next 2 hours practicing scenarios. Daniel played the role of various board members, asking intrusive questions about their relationship. Clara practiced deflecting with grace while maintaining warmth. They rehearsed walking together, standing together, the casual touches that would signal comfort and familiarity. Daniel taught her how to read his cues. A gentle pressure on her back meant, let's move. A squeeze of her hand meant, you're doing great. Stepping slightly in front of her meant, I'll handle this. By 8:30, they'd fallen into an easy rhythm. Clara had kicked off her heels and was curled into the corner of the couch, laughing at Daniel's impression of what he imagined pompous board members sounded like. You're terrible at this, she said, still laughing. Nobody actually talks like that. You'd be surprised. I once had a client who introduced himself by listing his degrees and professional credentials like they were his entire personality. I'm Daniel Reed, structural engineer, might as well have been, I'm boring and compensating. Clara's laugh was full and genuine, the sound filling Daniel's living room in a way that felt right. Okay, fair point. Corporate culture does produce some impressive specimens of self-importance. Speaking of which, Daniel said, his tone shifting to more serious, tell me about Richard. Not the professional rivalry, the person. What drives him? What's his weakness? Clara's expression sobered. Richard's a legacy hire. His father was on the board for 20 years before retiring. Richard grew up believing the executive suite was his birthright. He's competent enough, smart, strategic, good with clients, but he's never had to fight for anything. Everything's always been handed to him. So, seeing you compete for a position he thinks should be his drives him insane, Clara finished, especially because I'm better at it than he is. The numbers don't lie. My division outperforms his consistently. My client retention rates are higher. My team's satisfaction scores are better. On paper, I'm the obvious choice for CSO. But Richard has relationships, history, the comfort of familiarity. Most of the board has known him since he was a kid. They golf together, their families vacation together, they move in the same social circles. I'm the outsider, brilliant credentials, proven track record, but not one of them. Clara's voice was flat, resigned. That's why the personal stuff matters so much. It's the only arena where Richard has an advantage. If he can make me seem unstable or inappropriate, it gives the board the excuse they're looking for to choose him despite my superior performance. That's incredibly unfair. Welcome to corporate America. Well, Clara's smile was bitter. The playing field's never been level. You just get good at navigating the obstacles. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock on Daniel's mantel. Outside, the evening had deepened to full darkness, streetlights casting warm pools on the sidewalk. "Can I ask you something personal?" Clara said suddenly. "Given that you slept in my guest room and borrowed my clothes, I think we're past formal boundaries." Clara's smile was quick. "Fair. I was wondering, how did you and Sarah meet?" Daniel felt the familiar tightness in his chest that always came with talking about his late wife, but it was gentler than usual. "College. She was pre-med, I was engineering. We met in a physics class. She needed help with the math, I needed help understanding anything biological. We formed a study group. Then it became coffee after study sessions. Then it became dinner. Then it became everything." "She sounds wonderful." She was. Brilliant, driven, fiercely compassionate. She wanted to be a pediatric surgeon. She would have been incredible at it. Daniel paused, the old grief familiar but no longer overwhelming. The night she died, she was coming home from a late shift at the hospital where she was doing her residency. Wrong place, wrong time. Drunk driver ran a red light. "I'm so sorry." The worst part is how fast it was. One moment I'm married with a 3-year-old daughter and a wife I love. The next moment, I'm a single father trying to figure out how to explain death to a toddler who keeps asking when mommy's coming home. Daniel's voice was steady, factual. This was old pain, processed and integrated. It took a long time to accept that there was no making sense of it. It just was. Clara was quiet, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever think about dating again? Moving on?" "I think about it," Daniel admitted. "But the logistics are complicated. Emma comes first, always. Which means anyone I dated would need to understand that they're not the priority. My daughter is. Most people say they're okay with that, but very few actually are when it comes down to it." "That seems lonely." "Sometimes," Daniel agreed. "But it's honest, and I'd rather be lonely than compromise on what Emma needs." He shifted slightly, turning the question back. "What about you? You said your last relationship ended 3 years ago. Have you thought about trying again?" "Honestly, no. I learned a long time ago that my career and relationships don't coexist well. I'm too focused, too driven, too willing to sacrifice everything else for professional success. That's not fair to another person." Claire's voice was matter-of-fact. "So I chose. Career won." "Do you ever regret it?" Clara considered this seriously. "Sometimes I wonder what I've missed. The intimacy, the partnership, the comfort of having someone who's just yours. But then I think about what I've accomplished, the impact I've made, the position I've earned. And mostly, I think I made the right choice for who I am." "Mostly?" "There are moments, usually late at night, usually when I'm exhausted from another 16-hour day, when I wonder if I've built an impressive career but forgotten to build a life." Clara's smile was self-deprecating. Hence the complete absence of anyone to bring to a corporate gala, necessitating recruitment of my neighbor. "I'm glad you recruited me," Daniel said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "This is the most interesting thing that's happened to me in years." "Your life must be very boring, spectacularly so, which is how I like it." Daniel glanced at the clock, 9:45. "We should probably wrap up soon. Emma will be home by 10:30, and you have work tomorrow." Clara nodded, reaching for her shoes. Then she paused, her phone buzzing insistently. She pulled it out, her expression hardening as she read the screen. "What is it?" Daniel asked. Clara turned the phone toward him. Another photo. This one showing them through Daniel's living room window. Clara on the couch. Daniel nearby. The image intimate and damning despite its innocence. The message was brief. "Nice rehearsal. Looking forward to the real performance Saturday." Daniel felt rage flood through him, cold and sharp. "That's it. We're calling the police." "And telling them what? Someone took photos from a public street? That's not illegal, Daniel." "Harassment is illegal. Stalking is illegal." both of which require proof of repeated behavior with malicious intent, and proof that I've asked them to stop. I have neither." Claire's voice was tight with frustration. "Richard's too smart to leave evidence. The number's blocked, the photos are taken legally, and I can't prove he's behind them without launching an investigation that would take weeks." "So we just let him keep doing this?" "No," Clara said, standing abruptly. "We beat him at his own game. We show up Saturday looking so convincing, so stable, so absolutely perfect together that every photo he's taken, every rumor he's tried to start, every implication he's made looks like desperate mudslinging. We take his ammunition and we make it useless." Daniel stood too, impressed despite himself by her refusal to be intimidated. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure about you," Clara said firmly. "You're exactly what I said you were. Respectable, genuine, impossible to spin into scandal. With you at that gala, Richard has nothing. We just have to sell it." "Then we will," Daniel promised. "Tomorrow night, same time. We'll practice until it's perfect." Clara nodded, gathering her things. At the door, she paused. "Daniel?" Emma asked if I could come to her soccer game tomorrow afternoon. Daniel winced. "I meant to warn you about that. She really liked you this morning. You don't have to—" "What time is the game?" 4:00. "But Clara, you don't have to feel obligated." "I'd like to come," Clara said simply. "If that's okay." Daniel studied her, looking for signs of politeness masking reluctance, but her expression seemed genuine. "It's okay. She'd love it. Fair warning, though. Her team is terrible, and she spends half the game picking flowers instead of playing defense." Clara's smile was warm. "Sounds perfect." She left through the front door with a confidence that hadn't been there the night before, and Daniel watched until she was safely inside her own house. The dark sedan was back, parked in the same spot 3 houses down. Daniel memorized the details again: make, model, partial plate number, and made a decision. Richard Garrett wanted to play games with surveillance and intimidation? Fine. But Daniel was an engineer. He solved problems, and he was very good at collecting data. Tomorrow he'd set up his own cameras, document everything, build a case, because Clara might be willing to fight Richard on his terms, but Daniel had his own methods, and he protected what mattered. The house felt different after Clara left, not empty exactly, but waiting. Daniel cleaned up the coffee mugs, straightened the cushions, and tried not to think about how natural it had felt to have her there. Mrs. Patterson brought Emma home at 10:30, full of stories about cookie decorating and the movie they'd watched. Daniel listened with half his attention, while the other half cataloged everything he'd need to do tomorrow: set up surveillance, research Richard Garrett, prepare better for the gala, and somehow make it through Emma's soccer game with Clara in attendance without overthinking what any of it meant. "Dad," Emma said as he was tucking her into bed, "is Miss Monroe going to keep having problems that she needs help with?" "I don't know, sweetie. Why?" "Because I like when she's here. The house feels less quiet." Daniel's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" "It's not bad quiet," Emma clarified quickly. "Just quiet, like when it's just us. But when she was here this morning, it felt more full, like when Uncle Mike visits, except different." "Different how?" Emma thought about this seriously. "Warmer." Daniel kissed her forehead, not trusting his voice. "Get some sleep, monkey. Big game tomorrow." "And Miss Monroe's coming?" "She said she'd try." "Good." Emma snuggled into her blankets, already half asleep. "I think she needs friends. She seems lonely like you get sometimes." "Out of the mouths of children." Daniel turned off her light and headed downstairs, Emma's observation echoing in his mind. Clara did seem lonely, but then so was he. And maybe that's why this strange arrangement was working: 2 lonely people playing pretend at connection and somehow finding something real in the performance. His phone buzzed. A message from Clara. "Thank you for today and tonight. See you tomorrow at the game?" Daniel typed back. "We'll save you a seat. Fair warning, bring earplugs. Soccer parents are intense." Clara's response was immediate. "I handle corporate executives daily. How bad can youth sports parents possibly be?" Daniel smiled. She had no idea. He checked the locks, turned off the lights, and headed upstairs to bed. Through his bedroom window, he could see Clara's house next door, lights still on in what he assumed was her home office. Working late, as always. Driven and focused, and apparently willing to sacrifice everything for success. Except she'd said yes to Emma's game. That meant something. Daniel wasn't sure what yet, but it meant something. Outside, in the darkness, the sedan started its engine and pulled away. Daniel noted the time automatically, 11:43 p.m. Evidence. Data. Pattern recognition. He was building a case. And by Saturday night, Richard Garrett would learn what happened when you underestimated a structural engineer who'd promised to help. Daniel Reed built things that lasted, protected things that mattered. And somehow, in the space of 36 hours, Clara Monroe had become something worth protecting. The soccer field was chaos incarnate, exactly as Daniel had warned. 17 second graders in mismatched uniforms chased a ball with the strategic coordination of caffeinated squirrels, while parents shouted encouragement that ranged from supportive to borderline unhinged. Daniel stood on the sideline with the other families, coffee in hand, watching Emma pick dandelions near the goal she was supposed to be defending. "She's not actually playing," observed a voice beside him. Daniel turned to find Clara approaching, dressed down in jeans and a simple sweater that probably cost more than his entire outfit, but looked almost normal. Her hair was loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in that severe bun, and she wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. "She's playing," Daniel defended, "just not soccer specifically, more like interpretive dance with occasional ball contact." Clara's laugh was genuine, and several nearby parents turned to look. Daniel caught Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down doing a double take, clearly recognizing Clara from the neighborhood, but surprised to see her at a kid's soccer game. "You made it," Daniel said, surprised by how pleased he felt. "I said I would." Clara lowered her sunglasses slightly, and Daniel caught the dark circles beneath her eyes. "Though I'll admit I almost bailed. I had a board meeting this morning that went longer than expected." "How bad?" Richard brought up the CSO decision timeline, suggested the board needed to be absolutely certain about candidate stability before making such a critical appointment. Clara's voice was tight. "He didn't mention my name specifically, but everyone knew exactly who he meant." Daniel's jaw clenched. "What did you say?" "Nothing." I smiled, thanked him for his concern about the company's future leadership, and suggested we all focus on our current responsibilities rather than speculating about positions we don't yet hold. Clara's smile was sharp. Professional, composed, completely unrattled. Exactly what he didn't want. "Good." Daniel gestured toward the bleachers. "Come on. We've got about 30 minutes of game left, and Emma will be devastated if she doesn't see you here." They climbed to the second row, close enough to see the action, but far enough back to avoid the most intense parents. As they sat, Daniel felt Clara stiffen slightly beside him. He followed her gaze to find Mrs. Chen whispering to another mother, both women glancing in their direction with undisguised curiosity. "Relax," Daniel murmured. "They're just surprised to see you. It'll blow over." "I don't do neighborhood gossip well," Clara admitted. "I usually avoid it by never actually being around to participate." "Well, you're here now. Might as well commit." Daniel raised his voice slightly, addressing Mrs. Chen directly. "Hi, Susan. This is Clara Monroe, my neighbor from 2 houses down. She's helping me understand what's actually happening in this game, since I still can't figure out the offside rule." Mrs. Chen's expression shifted from suspicious to friendly with practiced ease. "Oh, there's no offside in youth soccer. Too complicated. They just kind of swarm." "That explains so much," Clara said, and her tone was so perfectly calibrated between humor and genuine interest that Daniel felt a flash of admiration. This was Clara in executive mode, reading the room, adjusting her approach, making people comfortable while maintaining control. On the field, Emma suddenly noticed them. Her face lit up with delight, and she waved enthusiastically, completely abandoning her defensive position to run toward the sideline. "Miss Monroe, you came!" "Emma," Daniel called, "you're supposed to be playing." "I am playing. I'm playing and saying hi." Emma turned back to the field just as the opposing team scored their 3rd goal of the half. The coach, a patient father named Mike, who volunteered more out of necessity than expertise, sighed deeply. Clara leaned closer to Daniel. "Is it always like this?" "This is actually pretty organized compared to some games. Last week, one kid started crying because a bee looked at him, and another decided mid-game that she needed to demonstrate her cartwheel skills for 20 minutes. I had no idea youth sports were this entertainingly chaotic. It's the best kind of chaos, Daniel said, and he meant it. No pressure, no real stakes, just kids learning teamwork and getting exercise. Win or lose, they all get juice boxes and feel like champions. Clara watched the field with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. That must be nice. Everything I did as a kid was high stakes. Piano competitions, academic decathlons, debate tournaments. My parents believed in excellence or nothing. Did you enjoy any of it? I was good at it, Clara said, which wasn't an answer. I won. That's what mattered. Daniel wanted to push further, to ask what 7-year-old Clara had actually wanted to do instead of performing excellence for her parents' approval, but the referee's whistle blew for halftime. Emma came running over, grass-stained and breathless. "Did you see me almost kick the ball?" she asked Clara excitedly. "I saw you definitely kick in the general direction of the ball," Clara said seriously. "Very strategic positioning." Emma beamed. "Coach says I have creative field awareness." "That's code for she's not paying attention," Daniel translated, but he was smiling. "Good effort, monkey. Keep it up." Emma grabbed a juice box from the cooler and plopped down on the grass near their feet, chattering about the game's highlights with the kind of detailed enthusiasm that suggested she'd been playing an entirely different sport than everyone else had been watching. Clara listened attentively, asking questions that indicated genuine interest rather than polite obligation. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Cute family moment. Very domestic. Shame it's all performance. He angled the phone away from Clara, not wanting to ruin the surprisingly pleasant afternoon, but she caught the movement. "What is it?" "Nothing. Just work." Clara's expression said she didn't believe him, but Emma's presence prevented further discussion. The second half started, equally chaotic as the first, and ended with Emma's team losing 4-1 but celebrating like they'd won the championship. Emma ran over, sweaty and grinning, and surprised everyone by hugging Clara goodbye. "Thanks for coming. Will you come to the next game too?" Clara glanced at Daniel, uncertain. He gave a small shrug. Her call. "If I can," Clara said carefully, "I'll try." "Okay." Emma accepted this with the easy optimism of childhood and ran off to join her teammates for the post-game snack distribution. Daniel and Clara walked toward the parking lot in comfortable silence. When they reached their cars, Clara paused. "Thank you for inviting me. That was actually nice." "You sound surprised." "I am, a little. I can't remember the last time I did something just for fun. No agenda, no networking, just showing up because someone asked." Clara's smile was soft. "Emma's wonderful, by the way. You're doing an amazing job with her." "Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water," Daniel admitted. "But she's happy, so I must be doing something right." Clara's phone rang, the tone sharp and professional. She glanced at the screen and her expression hardened. "I have to take this. Work emergency." "Go. I'll see you tonight, 6 o'clock?" "I'll be there." Clara answered her phone, voice shifting instantly to crisp executive mode. "Claire Monroe." "Yes, I've reviewed the quarterly projections." Daniel watched her pace toward her car, phone pressed to her ear, and wondered if she even realized how completely she transformed when work called. The woman who'd been laughing at chaotic soccer turned back into the vice president fighting for survival, just like that. His phone buzzed again. Another photo. This one showing Clara hugging Emma on the sideline. The message was poison. "Getting the kid involved now? Desperate move. Board won't like exploitation of minors for image management." Daniel's blood went cold. They were twisting everything, making something innocent look calculated and manipulative. He took a screenshot, added it to the folder he'd been building, and made a decision. Tonight, after their practice session, he was going to tell Clara everything, show her all the messages, all the photos, all the evidence he'd been collecting, because this had escalated beyond corporate gamesmanship into something darker, and she deserved to know exactly what they were dealing with. Emma ran over, interrupting his thoughts. "Ready to go, Dad?" "Ready. How about ice cream on the way home?" "Yes. Can we invite Miss Monroe?" Daniel glanced toward Clara, still on her phone, clearly deep in crisis management. "Not this time, monkey. She's got work stuff. But maybe another time." Emma accepted this with minimal protest, and they headed home for ice cream and the normal rhythms of weekend parenting. But Daniel's mind was already on tonight, on Clara, on the growing certainty that Richard Garrett wasn't just fighting dirty, he was fighting without limits. And that made him dangerous in ways Daniel was only beginning to understand. 6 o'clock arrived with the weight of everything unspoken. Clara knocked precisely on time, and when Daniel opened the door, he immediately knew something was wrong. Her makeup was perfect, her outfit impeccable, but her eyes were red-rimmed and her hands shook slightly as she gripped her portfolio. "Clara, we need to talk," she said, brushing past him into the living room. "Before we practice anything else, you need to see this." She pulled out her phone and thrust it toward him. Daniel took it, bracing himself for another harassing message. But what he saw made his stomach drop. It was an internal company email, forwarded from an anonymous source. The subject line read, "Concerns regarding VP Monroe's judgment and candidate suitability." The body of the email was a masterpiece of corporate assassination, carefully worded implications about Clara's recent erratic behavior, questionable personal associations, and potential instability during this critical evaluation period. Attached were the photos. Clara entering Daniel's house that first rainy night, leaving the next morning in borrowed clothes, at Emma's soccer game. But it was the final paragraph that made Daniel's hands clench into fists. Of particular concern is Ms. Monroe's apparent manipulation of a neighbor's child to craft a false narrative of domestic stability. Using a 7-year-old as a prop in image management raises serious questions about judgment and ethical boundaries. The board should carefully consider whether someone willing to exploit a child for professional gain demonstrates the character required for executive leadership. "This went to the entire executive team," Clara said, her voice hollow. "And the board. Richard sent it 2 hours ago." "This is slander," Daniel said immediately. "You're not exploiting Emma. You came to her game because she invited you. That's it. Try proving that to 200 executives who've now seen photos and a narrative that makes perfect sense if you don't know the truth." Clara sank onto the couch, all the fight seeming to drain out of her. "It's over. Even if I show up at the gala tomorrow with you, this email has already poisoned the well. They'll see us together and think exactly what Richard wants them to think, that I'm so desperate for the promotion, I've manufactured an entire fake relationship and dragged an innocent child into it." Daniel sat beside her, his mind racing through possibilities and solutions with the same systematic approach he used for structural problems. "We expose him. We show the board the messages he's been sending, the photos he's been taking. We prove this is a coordinated harassment campaign." "With what evidence?" "The number's blocked. The photos were taken from public property. I can't prove Richard sent anything." Clara's laugh was bitter. "He's too smart for that. He's probably got 3 layers of deniability. Someone else sent the email, someone else took the photos. He's just a concerned colleague raising legitimate questions about a competitor's fitness for leadership. Then we go over his head. We contact the board directly. We explain." "Explain what, Daniel?" Clara's voice rose, frustration breaking through. "That I'm so incapable of maintaining a normal personal life that I had to recruit my neighbor to pretend to be my boyfriend? That everything Richard's implying is essentially true, just with better intentions? That won't help. It'll just confirm I'm exactly what he says I am, someone with such poor judgment that I thought this plan would actually work." The silence that followed was heavy with defeat. Daniel watched Clara bury her face in her hands, shoulders shaking slightly, and felt rage build in his chest, not at her, but at the entire corrupt system that had brought them to this point. "No," he said firmly. Clara looked up. "What?" "No, I'm not accepting this. We're not giving up." Daniel stood, pacing the length of his living room with building momentum. "Richard wants you to fold. He wants you to withdraw from consideration, to make his path to CSO easy and uncomplicated. That's why he's escalating. He's trying to break you before tomorrow night. He's succeeding. Only if you let him." Daniel stopped pacing, crouching in front of Clara so they were eye level. "Listen to me. You are brilliant, qualified, and you've earned this position 10 times over. Richard is a mediocre executive coasting on family connections and willing to destroy someone's reputation because he can't compete on merit. So yes, he's got the advantage right now. He's got the narrative, the board's attention, and the appearance of legitimacy. but he doesn't have the truth. The truth doesn't matter if no one believes it. Then we make them believe it, Daniel said intensely. We don't just show up at that gala as a fake couple going through the motions. We show up and we're so genuine, so obviously comfortable with each other, so clearly not performing, that every word in Richard's email looks like exactly what it is, desperate slander from someone who knows he's losing. Clara stared at him, something flickering in her expression. How? We stopped practicing, Daniel said. We stopped rehearsing and performing and trying to manufacture authenticity. We just be. Two people who've gotten to know each other over the past few days. Two people who actually like spending time together. Because that's the truth, isn't it? Clara's breath caught. Daniel, I'm not saying we're actually dating, Daniel clarified quickly. I'm saying we're friends, real friends. And friendship, genuine connection, that's something you can't fake. That's what we show them tomorrow night. Not a performance, just us. I don't know if I can do that, Clara whispered. I've been performing for so long, I don't know how to just be anymore. Then I'll help you, Daniel said simply. That's what friends do. Clara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Why are you being so nice to me? Because you deserve nice. Because you've been fighting alone for so long, you've forgotten what it's like to have someone on your side. Daniel took her hand, the gesture no longer awkward or rehearsed, just natural. And because Emma was right, you do seem lonely, like I get sometimes, and maybe that means we understand each other better than we thought. A single tear tracked down Clara's cheek, and she wiped it away impatiently. If we do this, if we go to that gala tomorrow and try to salvage this disaster, I need you to understand something. It might not work. Richard might have already won. The board might see us together and think exactly what he wants them to think. And if that happens, if I lose this promotion, I need to know you won't blame yourself. And I need you to know that if we try and it doesn't work, at least we tried, Daniel countered. At least you didn't let Richard intimidate you into giving up. At least you fought. Clara held his gaze for a long moment, emotions warring across her face. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay. We fight, but no more practice sessions. No more rehearsing. If we're doing this as friends, then let's actually be friends. Deal. Daniel stood, pulling Clara up with him, which means we're not spending tonight going over talking points and practicing small talk. We're doing what friends actually do. Which is what? Daniel grinned. Have you ever played Mario Kart? 20 minutes later, Clara was perched on Daniel's couch, game controller in hand, cursing creatively as her character spun out on a banana peel for the third consecutive time. Emma, who'd been allowed to stay up late as a special treat, was coaching her with the kind of patient condescension only a 7-year-old could muster. No, Ms. Monroe, you have to drift around the corners, like this. I am drifting. The stupid turtle shell keeps hitting me. That's because Dad's really good at targeting. You gotta dodge better. Daniel, comfortably in first place, glanced over at Clara's fierce concentration and felt something warm settle in his chest. This was Clara without armor, competitive, frustrated, laughing despite herself when Emma's character accidentally launched off a ramp and into the ocean. This game is rigged, Clara declared as the race ended with her in 8th place. It's rigged against people who don't understand the mechanics, Daniel corrected, grinning. Want to try again? Absolutely. I refuse to lose to a 7-year-old and her smug father. They played for another hour, the atmosphere light and easy in a way that made the previous tension feel distant. Emma eventually fell asleep against Clara's side, and Clara looked down at her with an expression so tender it made Daniel's throat tight. She's really something special, Clara murmured, carefully adjusting Emma without waking her. She is, Daniel agreed. And for what it's worth, she really likes you. That hug at the soccer game, that was genuine. She doesn't do that with people she's just being polite to. I like her too, Clara said softly. And I'm sorry Richard dragged her into his narrative. That was never supposed to happen. It's not your fault. He's the one weaponizing normal human interaction. Daniel stood, gently lifting Emma into his arms. Let me put her to bed. I'll be right back. He carried Emma upstairs, her small body heavy with sleep, and tucked her in with practiced efficiency. When he came back down, Clara was standing at his bookshelf, studying the titles with genuine interest. You have Sarah's medical textbooks, she observed. I couldn't bring myself to get rid of them. They were important to her. Daniel joined her at the shelf. Sometimes I pull one out and try to read it, like maybe understanding what she studied will help me understand the parts of her I never got to know. It's stupid. It's not stupid. It's love. Claire's finger traced the spine of a particularly worn anatomy text. My parents threw out everything when they downsized last year. Told me if I wanted it, I should have made space for it. I lost my entire childhood because I didn't have room in my apartment. What would you have kept? If you could choose one thing? Clara was quiet for a moment. There was this snow globe my grandmother gave me. Nothing fancy, just a little glass dome with a miniature Victorian house inside. When you shook it, the snow would fall and make everything look peaceful and perfect. I used to stare at it for hours, imagining living in that tiny house where everything was simple and beautiful and no one expected you to be extraordinary. She laughed self-consciously. Stupid thing to miss. It's not stupid, Daniel echoed her words back to her. It's what mattered to you. That makes it important. Clara turned to face him, and they were suddenly close. Not the practiced closeness of their rehearsals, but genuine proximity that happened naturally when two people were comfortable together. Daniel could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the vulnerability she rarely showed, the woman beneath the executive armor. Thank you, Clara said quietly, for tonight, for reminding me what it feels like to just exist without performing. I'd forgotten. Anytime, Daniel said, and meant it. That's what friends do. Clara's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She pulled it out, her expression immediately hardening as she read the screen. It's my assistant. There's been another development. What kind of development? Clara's hands were shaking as she pulled up an email. Richards filed a formal ethics complaint with HR. He's claiming I'm using company time and resources to pursue personal relationships, citing my attendance at Emma's soccer game during business hours as evidence of misplaced priorities. You took an afternoon off. That's allowed. Not when you're a VP under evaluation for promotion. Every action gets scrutinized. Clara's voice was flat, defeated. He's building a comprehensive case. Every photo, every interaction, every moment I've spent away from work. He's twisting it into evidence of poor judgment and divided focus. Daniel felt the rage that had been simmering all evening finally boil over. That's enough. We're going to the police. This is harassment, Clara. It's stalking. It's corporate warfare, and it's technically legal, Clara interrupted. The photos are from public places. The ethics complaint is a legitimate use of HR processes. The email to the board was marked as confidential internal communication. Richard hasn't broken any laws. He's just an extraordinarily effective bastard. Then we fight back with our own complaint. We document his pattern of behavior. With what evidence? Clara's voice rose. Every message came from blocked numbers. Every photo could have been taken by anyone. I have no proof Richard's behind any of it, and any accusation I make without proof just makes me look desperate and vindictive. She pressed her palms against her eyes. I should never have involved you in this. I should never have thought we could outmaneuver him. He's been playing this game his entire life, and I was naive enough to think a few days of practice would be enough to beat him. Stop, Daniel said firmly. Stop spiraling. Stop accepting defeat before we've even tried. Daniel, it's over. It's not over until you say it's over, Daniel interrupted. And the Clara Monroe I've gotten to know over the past 3 days doesn't quit. She fights. Even when the system's rigged, even when the odds are impossible, she fights because that's who she is. Clara let out a choked laugh. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brilliant and driven and so scared of showing weakness that you've built walls so high you can barely see over them yourself. I know you choose work over everything else because achieving is safer than connecting. I know you came to my door in the rain because despite all that armor, some part of you still believes in justice and fairness and the possibility that someone might help without wanting something in return. Daniel stepped closer, his voice gentle but unwavering. And I know that tomorrow night, you're going to walk into that gala with your head high and show everyone exactly why you deserve that promotion. Because you've earned it, and because I'll be right there beside you. Clara's composure finally cracked. Tears spilled over, and she covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Daniel did what felt natural. He pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. She stiffened at first, unused to comfort, but then she melted into him, her fingers clutching his shirt like an anchor. They stood like that for several minutes, no words necessary, just human connection in its simplest form. When Clara finally pulled back, her makeup was ruined and her eyes were swollen, but something in her expression had shifted, not quite hope, but maybe the possibility of it. "I'm a mess," she said, her voice rough. "You're human," Daniel corrected. "There's a difference." Clara wiped her eyes, leaving mascara streaks she didn't seem to notice. "What time is the gala tomorrow?" 7 o'clock. Cocktail hour starts at 7, dinner at 8. "I'll pick you up at 6:30. We'll arrive together." Clara's voice was steadier now, decision made. "And Daniel? Whatever happens tomorrow night, whether we pull this off or crash and burn spectacularly, thank you for everything, for being exactly what I needed, even though I didn't know I needed it." "You're welcome," Daniel said simply. "Now go home, get some sleep, and tomorrow we'll show Richard Garrett what happens when he underestimates the structural integrity of people who've built their lives on solid foundations." Clara's laugh was watery but genuine. "Did you just make an engineering metaphor?" "I'm an engineer. It's what we do." She gathered her things, moving toward the door with more purpose than she'd had when she arrived. At the threshold, she paused. "Daniel? In another life, where I wasn't fighting for my career and you weren't protecting your daughter, and we were just two normal people, I think I would have really liked getting to know you." Before Daniel could respond, she was gone, disappearing into the night with her phone already pressed to her ear, back to work even in crisis. Daniel closed the door and leaned against it, Clara's words echoing in his mind. In another life. But this was the life they had. Complicated, messy, full of corporate warfare and fake relationships, and a gala that would determine far more than just a promotion. Daniel climbed the stairs, checked on Emma one final time, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be extraordinary or catastrophic, possibly both. But whatever happened, he'd meant what he said. He'd be right there beside Clara. Because that's what friends did. And somewhere in the chaos of the past 3 days, they'd become exactly that. Friends. Maybe even something more, though neither of them was ready to name it yet. Outside, the dark sedan made its final pass of the evening, camera lens glinting in the streetlight. Tomorrow's performance would have an audience. The only question was whether they'd be watching a triumph or a disaster. Saturday arrived with the kind of brilliant sunshine that felt like mockery. Daniel woke at dawn, his mind already racing through contingencies and worst-case scenarios with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent years calculating stress loads and failure points. The gala was 12 hours away, and every instinct he had was screaming that they were walking into a trap. He made coffee, strong and black, and sat at his kitchen table reviewing everything one final time. The folder he'd compiled over the past 3 days sat open before him. Screenshots of messages, photos of the surveillance sedan, timestamps and license plate numbers, a comprehensive documentation of Richard Garrett's harassment campaign. It was thorough, detailed, and ultimately useless without proof of who was behind it. Emma padded downstairs at 7, still in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Is today the fancy party?" "It is," Daniel confirmed, pulling her onto his lap. "Which means Mrs. Patterson is coming over tonight to stay with you. I'll probably be home late." "Is Miss Monroe going to the party too?" "She is. We're going together." Emma studied him with that unnerving perception children sometimes had. "Are you nervous?" "A little," Daniel admitted, because lying to Emma had never been his style. "It's a big important party for Miss Monroe's work. I want to make sure everything goes well for her." "You will," Emma said with absolute certainty. "You're really good at helping people. That's what you do." The simple faith in her voice made Daniel's chest tight. He hugged her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, and hoped desperately that her confidence wasn't misplaced. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Daniel tried to distract himself with household projects, fixing the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, organizing Emma's overflowing art supplies, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind occupied. But every time his phone buzzed, his heart jumped, expecting news of some new crisis or escalation. At 2 o'clock, Clara called. Her voice was strained, professional edges fraying. "I need to talk to you. Can I come over?" "Of course. Are you okay? Just come over, please." She arrived 10 minutes later, her car pulling into his driveway with the kind of aggressive speed that indicated barely controlled panic. Daniel opened the door before she could knock, and the look on her face confirmed his worst fears. "What happened?" Clara pushed past him into the living room, her movements jerky and agitated. "Richard went to the board this morning, private meeting, just him and 3 senior members. He presented what he's calling additional concerns about my candidacy." "What kind of concerns?" "Everything. The photos, the ethics complaint, a detailed timeline of my erratic behavior over the past week. But that's not the worst part." Claire's hands were shaking as she pulled up an email on her phone. "Look at this." Daniel took the phone and read. It was an internal memo from the board, marked confidential but somehow forwarded to Clara by an anonymous source. The subject line made his blood run cold. "Recommendation for CSO position. Decision required." The body of the email was brief and devastating. Based on recent concerns about candidate stability and judgment, the board was recommending postponing the CSO decision until a more thorough evaluation could be conducted. The current timeline, announcement at tonight's gala, was no longer advisable. Richard Garrett would assume interim CSO responsibilities pending final evaluation. "They're giving it to him," Clara said, her voice hollow. "Not officially, not yet, but interim positions always become permanent. By the time their thorough evaluation is complete, Richard will have already been acting CSO for months. The decision will be fait accompli." Daniel read the email again, his engineer's mind automatically analyzing the language, the implications, the careful legal phrasing that gave the board maximum flexibility while minimizing liability. "This isn't official yet. It's a recommendation, not a final decision." "It might as well be final. 3 board members signed off on it, including the chairman. The vote tonight was supposed to be a formality. I had the position locked. But Richard's campaign worked. He convinced them I'm too unstable, too risky, too compromised by personal drama to be trusted with executive leadership." Clara sank onto the couch, all the fight seeming to drain out of her. "It's over, Daniel. Even if we go to that gala tonight and give the performance of our lives, this decision's already been made." "Then we don't perform," Daniel said, a plan beginning to form in his mind with the same structural clarity he brought to architectural problems. "We tell the truth." Clara laughed bitterly. "The truth that I recruited my neighbor to be my fake boyfriend because I was so desperate to appear stable? That'll really inspire confidence." "No. The truth about Richard's harassment, the truth about his surveillance and intimidation tactics, the truth about what he's willing to do to eliminate competition." Daniel grabbed his folder from the kitchen table and brought it to Clara. "I've been documenting everything, every message, every photo, every instance of stalking and harassment. It's all here." Clara flipped through the folder, her expression shifting from despair to cautious hope to renewed frustration. "This is impressive, but it still doesn't prove Richard's behind it. The messages are from blocked numbers. The photos could be from anyone. Without concrete proof linking this to Richard, it's just more evidence of me being targeted, which actually supports his narrative that I'm too controversial to promote." "Then we force his hand," Daniel said, his voice taking on an edge Clara had never heard before. "We make him reveal himself." "How?" Daniel's mind was racing now, calculations and contingencies falling into place with satisfying precision. "Tonight at the gala, we don't just show up as a convincing couple. We announce our relationship publicly. We control the narrative before Richard can twist it. We acknowledge that, yes, we've been seeing each other quietly, and yes, it started recently, but it's genuine and serious and completely separate from your professional life." "That won't change the board's decision." "Let me finish," Daniel interrupted. "We make the announcement and we watch Richard's reaction. Because here's what I've learned about men like Richard Garrett. They can't resist gloating. When he thinks he's won, when he sees us making what he thinks is a desperate last move, he'll slip. He'll say something, reveal something, give us the proof we need that he's been orchestrating this entire campaign." Clara stared at him. "That's incredibly risky. If it doesn't work, then we're no worse off than we are right now," Daniel said bluntly. "The board's already decided against you. Richard's already won according to that memo. We've got nothing to lose by forcing a confrontation. We've got your reputation to lose, your connection to Emma. If this goes badly, you'll be collateral damage in corporate warfare that has nothing to do with you." Clara's voice was fierce. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself for a promotion that's already lost." "It's not about the promotion anymore," Daniel said quietly. "It's about principle. It's about not letting bullies win just because they're willing to fight dirtier. It's about showing Emma that when systems are rigged and people are cruel, you don't fold. You fight back with truth and integrity and the stubbornness to refuse defeat." He took Claire's hands, holding her gaze with absolute certainty. "I'm in this now. All the way. Not as your fake boyfriend, not as a prop in your image management, but as your friend who believes you deserve better than what Richard Garrett and his cronies are offering." Clara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," Daniel agreed with a slight smile. "I'm a catch, mediocre Mario Kart skills aside." The laugh that burst from Clara was half sob, half genuine amusement. "You're ridiculous. I'm determined. There's a difference." Daniel squeezed her hands gently. "So here's what we're going to do. We're going to that gala. We're going to look incredible together. And when the moment's right, we're going to tell the truth, the whole truth about Richard's campaign. And we're going to do it in a way that makes it impossible for him to hide behind deniability. How do we prove he's behind the messages and photos? We don't," Daniel said. "We make him prove it himself." Understanding dawned on Clara's face, followed by calculation, then determination. "We bait him into revealing his hand." "Exactly. We give him enough rope to hang himself, then we document everything." Daniel pulled out his phone. "I'm going to record the entire evening. Audio, video, everything. The moment Richard slips up and reveals knowledge he shouldn't have, like details from messages that supposedly came from anonymous sources, we've got him. That's still not definitive proof. It's enough to start an investigation, enough to make the board question Richard's ethics, enough to delay his interim appointment while they look into allegations of corporate misconduct." Daniel's voice was steady, confident, and once there's an investigation, everything comes out. The surveillance, the harassment, the manufactured ethics complaints. Richard's not as smart as he thinks he is. Bullies rarely are. He's left a trail, and the moment the board starts looking for it, they'll find it. Claire was quiet for a long moment, her brilliant strategic mind clearly running through scenarios and probabilities. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, we do it. But Daniel, if this goes wrong, if Richard outmaneuvers us and things get ugly, you walk away. You protect Emma and yourself, and you let me handle the fallout. Promise me." "I promise nothing," Daniel said firmly. "We're partners in this. We succeed together, or we fail together, but I'm not abandoning you mid-battle because things get difficult." "You're impossibly stubborn." "So I've been told." Daniel checked his watch. 4:15. "We've got 2 hours before you pick me up. I need to get Emma settled with Mrs. Patterson and get ready. You should go home, get ready, and prepare yourself for what's coming." Clara stood, gathering her composure with visible effort. "What should I wear? I was planning on the blue evening gown, but if we're making a statement, wear whatever makes you feel powerful," Daniel said. "Wear what makes you feel like the executive who's earned this position 10 times over, because that's who you are, and that's who they need to see." Clara nodded, already mentally preparing. At the door, she paused. "Daniel, when this is over, whether we win or lose, I owe you a debt I can never repay." "You don't owe me anything," Daniel said. "That's not how friendship works." Clara's smile was soft, vulnerable in a way that made her look younger. "Then as a friend, let me say thank you for seeing me, for believing in me, for being exactly what I needed when I needed it most." She left before Daniel could respond, her car pulling away with purpose and determination. Daniel watched until she was gone, then turned to find Emma standing at the bottom of the stairs, watching him with curious eyes. "That was serious talking," Emma observed. "Very serious," Daniel agreed. "Miss Monroe's having a difficult time at work, and I'm trying to help." "Are you going to fix it?" Daniel crouched down to Emma's level. "I'm going to try. But sometimes, Monkey, The important thing isn't whether you succeed, it's that you tried, that you stood up for what's right even when it's hard. Emma considered this with the gravity only children could bring to philosophical concepts. Like when Tommy pushed Sarah on the playground and I told the teacher even though Tommy said he'd be mad at me? Exactly like that. You did the right thing even though it was scary. Miss Monroe is lucky to have you helping, Emma said seriously. You're really good at right things. Daniel hugged his daughter close, hoping desperately that her faith wasn't about to be shattered by the harsh realities of corporate warfare and power dynamics. I love you, monkey. You know that? I know. I love you too. Emma pulled back, her next words devastating in their innocence. Is Ms. Monroe going to be around after tonight? After her work problem is fixed? It was the question Daniel had been avoiding asking himself. I don't know, sweetie. That depends on a lot of things. I hope she is, Emma said simply. I like her. And I think she's lonely like you get sometimes. Maybe you could be not lonely together. Out of the mouths of children, indeed. Daniel kissed Emma's forehead and stood. Come on, let's get you fed before Mrs. Patterson gets here, and you can help me pick out what to wear to this fancy party. Emma's enthusiasm for playing stylist was endearing, if not particularly helpful. She advocated strongly for Daniel wearing his favorite dinosaur tie, which he gently vetoed in favor of the traditional black bow tie, appropriate for formal events. By the time Mrs. Patterson arrived at 5:30, Daniel was as ready as he'd ever be, dressed in a tuxedo he'd bought for a wedding 3 years ago and had never expected to wear again. Mrs. Patterson took one look at him and whistled. Well, don't you clean up nice? Big date tonight? Something like that, Daniel said, not wanting to explain the complicated truth. I should be home by midnight. Emma's already had dinner, but she's allowed one movie before bed. We'll be fine, Mrs. Patterson assured him. You go have fun with your lady friend. Emma hugged him goodbye with the unself-conscious affection he treasured, and Daniel headed outside to wait for Clara. 6:25. She'd be here any minute, and then there was no turning back. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Enjoy your last dance. The music stops at midnight. Daniel saved the screenshot, added it to his evidence folder, and refused to let the threat rattle him. Whoever was sending these messages, Richard or one of his proxies, they were about to learn what happened when they underestimated a structural engineer's capacity for strategic problem-solving. A sleek black car pulled into his driveway at exactly 6:30. Clara stepped out, and Daniel's breath caught despite himself. She wore a deep emerald gown that should have been illegal, elegant, sophisticated, and powerful, in a way that had nothing to do with sexuality and everything to do with absolute confidence. Her hair was swept up in an intricate style that exposed the elegant line of her neck. Diamonds, real ones Daniel suspected, glittered at her ears and throat. She looked like every inch the executive VP fighting for a promotion, but there was something else underneath. Vulnerability, determination, and maybe, if Daniel wasn't imagining it, genuine affection as her eyes met his. You look incredible, Daniel said honestly. So do you, Claire replied, her voice slightly breathless. Ready for this? Ready as I'll ever be. Daniel walked to the car, sliding into the passenger seat with the strange sensation of stepping into a different world. Claire's car was luxury incarnate, leather seats, ambient lighting, technology he couldn't begin to understand. Clara drove with focused intensity, her hands steady on the wheel despite what Daniel knew had to be massive internal turmoil. They were 5 minutes into the drive when she spoke. I've been thinking about your plan, about baiting Richard into revealing himself. And I think I know how to do it. Claire's voice was calculating, strategic. During the cocktail hour, we make our relationship public. Not a formal announcement, just casual mentions in conversation. Let it spread naturally through the crowd. Richard will hear about it within minutes. Gossip moves fast at these events. Then what? Then we wait for his reaction. Richard's ego won't let him stay quiet. He'll want to gloat, to let me know he won despite my desperate last move. That's when he'll slip up. Clara glanced at Daniel briefly before returning her eyes to the road. But we need witnesses. Everything he says needs to be documented in a way that's undeniable. I'll be recording, Daniel said, patting his phone in his pocket. Audio at minimum. Video, if I can manage it discreetly. Not enough. Richard will claim the recording is doctored or taken out of context. Claire's jaw tightened. We need someone credible. Someone the board trusts. Someone who can corroborate what happens. Who did you have in mind? Margaret Chen. She's on the board and she's been mentoring me for the past 2 years. She's fair, she's ethical, and she hates corporate politics. Claire's voice gained momentum. If we can get Margaret to witness Richard's reaction, to see him reveal knowledge he shouldn't have, her testimony will carry weight the board can't ignore. Will she help us? I don't know, Claire admitted. But she's my best chance. She's been uncomfortable with how quickly Richard's been pushing the narrative against me. If I can show her evidence of actual misconduct rather than just professional rivalry, she might intervene. The plan was risky, dependent on too many variables Daniel couldn't control, but it was better than walking in blind. Okay. We get Margaret on our side, we bait Richard into revealing his hand, and we document everything. What could possibly go wrong? Clara's laugh was sharp. Everything. Literally everything. But at least we'll go down fighting. They drove the rest of the way in contemplative silence, the city lights growing brighter as they approached the Grandview Hotel. The building was magnificent, 50 stories of glass and steel, the ballroom level marked by elaborate lighting and the kind of expensive elegance that screamed corporate success. Valets stood ready at the circular drive and well-dressed couples were already making their way inside. Clara pulled up to the valet stand, and Daniel saw her hands tighten on the steering wheel for just a moment before she released it. Last chance to back out. Not a chance, Daniel said firmly. He stepped out of the car and walked around to open Clara's door, offering his hand with the natural courtesy that didn't need rehearsal. She took it, and they stood together for a moment in the golden light spilling from the hotel entrance. We've got this, Daniel murmured, quiet enough that only Clara could hear. We'd better, Clara replied. Then she straightened, her executive armor sliding into place with visible precision, and together they walked into the lion's den. The ballroom was everything Clara had described and more. Crystal chandeliers, elaborate floral arrangements, round tables dressed in silk and silver. The cocktail hour was in full swing, 200 executives and their partners mingling with practiced social grace. The air hummed with conversation, clinking glasses, and the subtle undertone of professional networking disguised as casual interaction. Daniel felt immediately out of place, his engineer's brain cataloging structural details and escape routes rather than focusing on social dynamics. But Clara's hand tightened on his arm, grounding him, reminding him why they were here. Stay close, Clara murmured. I'll handle introductions. You just be yourself. They waded into the crowd, and Daniel watched Clara transform before his eyes. Every introduction was smooth, every smile perfectly calibrated, every word chosen with strategic precision. She introduced Daniel as my partner, Daniel Reed. He's a structural engineer, absolutely brilliant with complex problems. The phrasing was deliberate, Daniel realized. Partner could mean professional or romantic, leaving just enough ambiguity to spark curiosity without providing definitive answers. Within 15 minutes, Daniel had met more vice presidents, senior executives, and board members than he'd encountered in his entire career. Names blurred together, but he focused on reading people the way he read structural diagrams, looking for weak points, stress indicators, signs of instability. He was shaking hands with a VP named Thomas something when he spotted Richard Garrett across the room. The man was exactly what Daniel had imagined. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of effortless confidence that came from never having to fight for anything. He was talking to a cluster of board members, his body language relaxed and proprietary. Then his gaze landed on Daniel and Clara, and his expression shifted to something cold and calculating. There he is, Clara murmured, following Daniel's gaze. The enemy himself. He's watching us. Good, let him watch. Clara's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Come on. I see Margaret by the bar, time to start building our case. They made their way through the crowd, and Daniel felt Richard's eyes tracking their movement like a predator watching prey. The weight of surveillance was familiar now. He'd felt it for days through photos and messages. But experiencing it directly was different, more visceral, more threatening. Margaret Chen turned out to be a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She greeted Clara with genuine warmth, then studied Daniel with unconcealed curiosity. "So this is the mysterious neighbor," Margaret said, her voice carrying the faint accent of someone who'd immigrated young but never quite lost their original cadence. "Clara's mentioned you." "She has?" Daniel glanced at Clara, surprised. "I mentioned that I had a friend helping me with a situation," Clara said carefully. "Margaret's been a mentor to me. She knows about Richard's campaign." Margaret's expression darkened. "What I know is that Richard Garrett is a mediocre executive trading on family connections and willing to destroy talented people to protect his unearned advantages. What I don't know is proof of his tactics." Her gaze sharpened on Daniel. "Clara says you've been documenting harassment. Is that true?" Daniel pulled out his phone, pulling up the evidence folder. Messages, photos, timestamps, patterns of surveillance, everything that's happened over the past week. Margaret studied the screen, her expression growing increasingly grim. "This is extensive. But without proof linking it to Richard, we're working on that," Clara interrupted. "Tonight, we're going to make him reveal himself." "How?" Clara explained the plan in quick, quiet terms. The public acknowledgement of their relationship, the calculated provocation, the hope that Richard's ego would push him to gloat in a way that exposed his involvement. Margaret listened without interruption, her face unreadable. When Clara finished, Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I'll help. But Daniel, you need to understand something. If this goes wrong, the fallout will be significant. Richard has powerful allies on the board. If you accuse him without ironclad proof, they'll destroy your credibility and Clara's career in the process." "I understand," Daniel said steadily. "We're doing it anyway." Margaret's smile was approving. "Then let's make sure we do it right. I'll position myself near Richard during dinner. If he says anything incriminating, I'll be close enough to hear and corroborate." She turned to Clara. "But you need to be prepared for the possibility that even with proof, the board might not act. Corporate politics are ugly, and Richard's father still has influence." "I know," Clara said quietly. "But at least we'll have tried." "That's all we can ever do," Margaret agreed. She raised her glass in a small salute. "To truth and justice, may they occasionally prevail over power and privilege." They touched glasses, a small gesture of solidarity, and then the chimes rang announcing dinner. The crowd began moving toward their assigned tables, and Daniel felt his pulse quicken. This was it. The performance was about to begin, and there was no more time for preparation or second-guessing. Clara led him to a table near the front, marked with elegant calligraphy. Table 3, Executive Leadership. They were seated with 4 other couples, all senior executives and their spouses. Richard Garrett was at table 1, 20 feet away, positioned to watch their every move. As they sat, Daniel felt Clara's hand find his under the table, her fingers lacing through his in a gesture that felt less like performance and more like genuine need for support. He squeezed gently, and she squeezed back, a silent conversation passing between them. The first course arrived, and with it came the casual dinner conversation that was anything but casual. The executive to Daniel's left, a CFO named James, asked how he and Clara had met. Daniel felt all eyes at the table turned toward them, curiosity barely concealed beneath polite interest. "We're neighbors," Daniel said, keeping his voice natural and easy. "Clara moved in about 8 months ago. We started talking, realized we had more in common than expected, and..." He glanced at Clara, letting genuine affection show in his expression. "Things developed from there." "How romantic," James's wife said, her tone suggesting she found it anything but. "Corporate executive and the boy next door. Very modern." The subtle condescension made Daniel's jaw tighten, but Clara's hand squeezed his again, a reminder to stay calm, stay on message. "Daniel's hardly a boy," Clara said smoothly. "He's a structural engineer with his own consulting firm. And honestly, after spending years surrounded by corporate politics, it's refreshing to be with someone whose first instinct is to build things rather than tear them down." The comment landed with perfect precision, and Daniel caught the flicker of understanding in James's eyes. This was Clara firing the first shot, establishing the narrative they wanted before Richard could twist it. Conversation continued through the second course, gradually easing from interrogation to genuine interest as Daniel shared stories about Emma and Clara spoke about discovering the challenges and joys of connecting with a single parent. They weren't performing anymore, Daniel realized. They were just talking, just being themselves, and it was working precisely because it was authentic. Across the room, Richard was watching with an expression that had shifted from calculating to frustrated. He'd expected desperation. Instead, he was seeing something that looked undeniably real. The main course arrived, and with it came the moment Daniel had been simultaneously dreading and anticipating. Richard Garrett stood, glass in hand, commanding attention with the easy authority of someone who'd never been denied. "I'd like to propose a toast," Richard announced, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "To this company, to our future leadership, and to the importance of making decisions based on sound judgment and unwavering integrity." The words were innocuous, but the way Richard's eyes locked on Clara made the subtext crystal clear. This was a challenge, a provocation, a reminder that he believed he'd already won. Clara stood as well, her movement graceful and controlled. "I'll second that toast," she said clearly. "To sound judgment, integrity, and the courage to recognize that true leadership isn't inherited. It's earned through dedication, merit, and the refusal to compromise one's ethics even when taking the easy path is tempting." The ballroom had gone silent. Everyone recognized what they were witnessing, a confrontation wrapped in corporate courtesy, two rivals facing off with words as weapons. Richard's smile was sharp. "Well said, Clara, though I hope we all remember that consistency matters as much as courage. Leaders whose personal lives reflect the same stability as their professional performance inspire confidence. Don't you agree?" "Absolutely," Clara replied without hesitation. "Which is why I'm grateful to have found someone who reminds me that life shouldn't be all work and no connection. Balance, after all, is the true mark of mature leadership." She sat down, her hand finding Daniel's again under the table, and the room erupted in conversation. Richard's expression had hardened, his carefully crafted narrative disrupted by Clara's refusal to be shamed. Margaret caught Daniel's eye from her table and gave a small nod. She'd heard, she'd seen, and she understood. The trap was set. Now they just had to wait for Richard to spring it. Dinner continued with mounting tension beneath the surface courtesy. Daniel could feel the room's attention shifting between their table and Richard's, corporate warfare playing out in glances and carefully chosen words. When dessert finally arrived, Daniel was wound so tight he could barely taste the chocolate, whatever it was, on his plate. Then Richard made his move. He approached their table during coffee service, his smile perfectly pleasant and completely venomous. "Clara, could I speak with you privately? Just a quick word about Monday's executive meeting." "Of course," Clara said, already standing. She glanced at Daniel. "I'll be right back." Daniel watched them walk toward a quiet corner near the bar, every instinct screaming that this was wrong, this was dangerous, this was the moment where everything could go catastrophically sideways. He pulled out his phone, activating the voice recorder with practiced casualness, and stood. "Excuse me," he murmured to the table. "Restroom." He moved through the crowd with deliberate purpose, positioning himself near enough to Clara and Richard to hear, but far enough to avoid seeming like he was eavesdropping. Margaret was already there, nursing a drink at the bar, with the kind of strategic positioning that suggested she'd had the same thought. Richard's voice carried just enough for Daniel to hear. "That was quite a performance at dinner, very touching, but we both know the truth, don't we?" "And what truth is that?" Claire's voice was steady, controlled. "That you're desperate enough to manufacture a relationship to salvage your candidacy. That you've been running around with your neighbor, creating photo opportunities and crafting a narrative of domestic stability." Richard's laugh was cold. "Did you really think it would work? That a few carefully staged moments would erase legitimate concerns about your judgment?" "I think," Clara said carefully, "that my personal life is none of your business. And I think your obsession with it says more about your insecurity than my fitness for leadership." "My insecurity?" Richard's voice sharpened. "I'm not the one scrambling to create a fake boyfriend because I'm so consumed by work that I've forgotten how to have an actual life. Tell me, Clara, does he know this is temporary? That the moment the board makes their decision, and they will in my favor, you'll drop him like yesterday's strategy memo?" Daniel's hands clenched, but he forced himself to stay still, to keep recording. You seem very confident about the board's decision, Clara observed, almost like you know something I don't. I know that those photos of you sneaking around with your neighbor at all hours, looking desperate and unstable, painted a very clear picture. I know that the ethics complaint about misusing company time carried weight. I know that reasonable people have reasonable doubts about your priorities. Richard's voice dropped, triumphant and cruel. And I know that by Monday morning, I'll be announced as interim CSO while you face a comprehensive review of your professional conduct. There it was. Knowledge he shouldn't have. Details he couldn't know unless he was behind the surveillance, the photos, the entire harassment campaign. Clara's voice was ice. Those are very specific details, Richard, almost like you've been coordinating them personally. I don't know what you're implying. I'm implying that you've been so desperate to eliminate competition that you've engaged in harassment, stalking, and corporate misconduct. I'm implying that every photo, every message, every strategic leak came from you or people working on your behalf. Clara's voice gained strength, loud enough now that nearby conversations were pausing to listen. And I'm implying that when the board investigates, and they will investigate, all of this will come to light. Richard's laugh was sharp. Investigate with what evidence? Some blocked messages and photos taken from public property? Good luck proving anything, Clara. I've been very careful. Not careful enough, said Margaret Chen, stepping forward from the bar. I heard every word, Richard, and Daniel recorded it. Richard spun, his expression shifting from triumph to shock to rage in rapid sequence. You have no right. I have every right to document a conversation I'm part of, Daniel said calmly, stepping forward with his phone clearly visible. And you just admitted to orchestrating a harassment campaign against Clara. That's misconduct at minimum, possibly illegal depending on how the evidence shakes out. That recording won't hold up. It doesn't have to, Margaret interrupted. I'm a board member, and I just witnessed you admitting to corporate misconduct. That's enough to launch an immediate investigation and suspend your candidacy for CSO pending the outcome. The color drained from Richard's face. Around them, the conversations had stopped entirely. Half the ballroom was watching now, witnessing the confrontation with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for car accidents. You're bluffing, Richard said, but his voice had lost its confidence. You wouldn't dare. Watch me, Margaret said coldly. She pulled out her own phone, already dialing. James, it's Margaret. We have a situation at the gala that requires immediate board attention. Yes, tonight. Conference room A in 10 minutes. It's urgent. Richard's composure cracked completely. This is absurd. You're taking the word of a desperate candidate and her fake boyfriend over mine? Over a board recommendation that's already been approved? That recommendation was based on false information provided through misconduct, Margaret said sharply, which makes it invalid. The board will review all evidence and make a new determination based on actual facts rather than manufactured scandal. Richard looked around wildly, searching for support, but the executives watching wore expressions ranging from shock to disgust. No one stepped forward to defend him. In that moment, Daniel saw the reality dawn on Richard's face. He'd lost. Not just the promotion, but his reputation, his credibility, everything he'd risked to eliminate Clara. You'll regret this, Richard spat at Clara. All of you. This company will be better without you, Clara finished quietly. Goodbye, Richard. Security was already approaching, summoned by Margaret's call. Richard was escorted out with as much discretion as possible, but the damage to his image was complete and irreversible. The moment the doors closed behind him, the ballroom erupted in conversation. Daniel turned to Clara, who was standing very still, her face pale but composed. Are you okay? I don't know, Clara said honestly. I think so. I can't quite believe that actually worked. It worked because you were right about his ego, Daniel said. He couldn't resist gloating. It made him sloppy. Margaret rejoined them, her expression grim but satisfied. The board will convene immediately to review the evidence and determine next steps. Clara, you should expect a call within the hour. Daniel, I'll need that recording for the investigation. Of course. Daniel forwarded the audio file to Margaret's email address, his hands surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. What happens now? Clara asked. Now, Margaret said, We let the process work. Richard will be suspended pending investigation. The CSO decision will be postponed until we can properly evaluate all candidates without the cloud of misconduct hanging over the proceedings. She paused, her expression softening slightly. For what it's worth, Clara, your handling of this situation demonstrated exactly the kind of grace under pressure we need in executive leadership. I'll be making that clear to the board. Clara's eyes were bright. Thank you, Margaret, for everything. Thank yourself. You did the hard part. Margaret squeezed Clara's shoulder briefly, then headed toward the conference rooms where the emergency board meeting would take place. Daniel and Clara stood together in the ballroom, surrounded by curious onlookers and uncertain what to do next. Then Clara started laughing, genuine, slightly hysterical laughter that made her shoulders shake. "We did it," she said between laughs. "We actually did it. We trapped him into confessing." "We did," Daniel agreed, feeling his own smile spread. Though for a minute there I thought he might actually get violent. Richard's too image-conscious for violence, but his career is over, which for him is probably worse than any physical pain. Clara's laughter faded, replaced by something more serious. "I can't believe you recorded that entire conversation. That was incredibly risky." So was confronting him in public. We were both taking risks. Daniel glanced around the ballroom, where people were still watching with undisguised interest. "Should we stay, or would you rather get out of here?" Clara followed his gaze, her executive armor sliding back into place with visible effort. "We should stay through the announcement. The board will want to address what happened, reassure everyone that the company takes misconduct seriously. It's important that I'm here, that I'm composed and professional despite the chaos." "Okay," Daniel said. "Then we stay. Together." Clara's smile was warm, genuine, the woman beneath the executive finally visible without shame or apology. "Together," she agreed. They stayed through the announcement, through the carefully worded statement about Richard's suspension and the investigation into allegations of misconduct, through the reassurances that the CSO decision would be made based solely on merit and qualifications. Clara handled every question with grace. Daniel stood beside her with quiet support, and by the time the gala finally ended at 11:30, they'd survived not just Richard's attack, but the entire corporate circus. In Clara's car, finally alone, the adrenaline began to crash. Clara's hands shook as she started the engine, and Daniel reached over to steady them. "You're okay," he said quietly. "We're okay. It's over." "Is it?" Clara's voice was small, vulnerable. "Richard's suspended, but the investigation could take weeks. The board could still find a way to blame me for all of this. And even if they don't, even if I get the promotion, everyone now knows that I needed my neighbor to play fake boyfriend to appear stable enough for consideration. Everyone knows," Daniel corrected gently, "that when faced with harassment and misconduct, you stood up for yourself with integrity and courage. They know you refused to be intimidated. They know you exposed corruption even when it was risky. That's what they'll remember." Clara pulled out of the parking lot, driving toward home with careful precision. They were halfway there when she spoke again. "What happens now? With us, I mean." It was the question Daniel had been avoiding, the conversation they'd both sidestepped through the chaos of the past 4 days. "I don't know," he admitted. "What do you want to happen?" "Honestly, I don't know either. This started as performance, but somewhere along the way it became real. The friendship, the connection, the feeling of having someone genuinely on my side." Clara's voice was rough with emotion. "But I don't know how to do real, Daniel. I don't know how to balance a personal life with the career that's consumed me for 15 years. And I don't know if it's fair to ask you and Emma to be part of that experiment when I might fail spectacularly." "You won't fail," Daniel said. "But you're right that it's complicated. Emma's already attached to you. If you decide you can't make space for us in your life, that will hurt her. And me. Then what do we do?" Daniel thought about Emma's observation, that Clara seemed lonely like he got sometimes, that maybe they could be not lonely together. He thought about the past 4 days, about laughter over Mario Kart, and dinosaur explanations, and the feeling of Clara's hand in his that had shifted from awkward to natural so quickly it should have been frightening. "We try," he said finally. "No performance, no agenda, Just honest effort to see if what we've built over chaos can survive normal life. We go slow, we protect Emma, and we're honest about what we can and can't handle. And if it doesn't work, at least we'll know we tried. Clara pulled into Daniel's driveway, the porch light casting warm shadows across her face. "I'd like that," she said softly. "The trying part. No promises about success, but genuine effort to see what's actually here." "That's all anyone can ask," Daniel said. He leaned over and kissed her forehead, gentle and chaste, a promise rather than a claim. "Get some rest. The board will probably call tomorrow, and you need to be ready." "Tomorrow," Clara agreed. "And Daniel, thank you. For everything. For being exactly what I needed even when I didn't know I needed it." "Same to you," Daniel said, and meant it more than he'd meant anything in years. He watched Clara drive the short distance to her house, watched her lights turn on one by one, and only then did he head inside. Mrs. Patterson was asleep on the couch, and Emma was safely in bed, her nightlight casting familiar shadows. Daniel paid Mrs. Patterson and walked her out, then climbed the stairs to check on his daughter. Emma was sprawled across her bed in the boneless way only children could manage, one arm hanging off the side, completely at peace. "We did it, Monkey," Daniel whispered, though she was too deeply asleep to hear. "We stood up for what was right, and maybe, just maybe, we found something worth keeping along the way." His phone buzzed. A message from Clara. "Sleep well. Tomorrow we see what happens when the dust settles. But tonight, we won." Daniel typed back, "Tonight we won. Tomorrow we live with it. And whatever comes next, we face it honestly." The response was immediate. "Honestly sounds perfect." Daniel fell asleep with his phone still in his hand, exhaustion finally claiming him, and dreamed of structures that could withstand any storm as long as their foundations were built on truth. Outside, the dark sedan was finally, blessedly absent. The surveillance had ended. The performance was over. And whatever came next would be real, messy, complicated, and entirely their choice to navigate. Together, Sunday morning arrived with the kind of peaceful quiet that felt almost suspicious after the chaos of the previous night. Daniel woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window and the sound of Emma singing off-key in her room, blissfully unaware that her father had spent the evening dismantling corporate corruption and possibly starting something real with the woman next door. He made coffee and was halfway through his first cup when his phone rang. Margaret Chen's name appeared on the screen, and Daniel's stomach immediately tightened. "Margaret, is everything okay?" "Better than okay," Margaret said, and Daniel could hear the smile in her voice. "The board met until 3 this morning. We reviewed all the evidence. Your recordings, the documentation you compiled, testimonies from multiple witnesses who'd observed Richard's behavior over the past weeks. The investigation is officially open, and Richard Garrett has been terminated effective immediately." Terminated? Not just suspended? The evidence was overwhelming. Beyond the harassment campaign against Clara, we found a pattern of similar behavior targeting other employees over the years. Richard had been using intimidation and manufactured scandals to eliminate competition for nearly a decade. The board couldn't ignore it once we started looking. Margaret paused. "There will be legal ramifications for him. What he did crosses several lines into criminal territory: stalking, harassment, possibly defamation. The company's legal team is coordinating with law enforcement." Daniel felt a surge of satisfaction so fierce it surprised him. "Good. He deserves everything that's coming." "He does. But Daniel, I'm calling because you deserve to know what else the board decided." Margaret's tone shifted, becoming more formal. "We voted unanimously to offer Clara the Chief Strategy Officer position. No interim period, no additional evaluation. She's earned it 10 times over, and her handling of an impossible situation demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership we need." Relief flooded through Daniel so powerfully his knees went weak. "That's incredible? Does she know?" "The chairman is calling her this morning to make the official offer. I wanted you to hear it first because, frankly, without your help, we might never have uncovered Richard's misconduct. You did something remarkable, Daniel. You protected someone who needed it. You stood up to corruption, and you did it with integrity and intelligence. Clara's lucky to have you in her corner." "I'm pretty lucky too," Daniel said quietly. "She's extraordinary." "She is," Margaret agreed. Take care of her, Daniel, and tell that brilliant daughter of yours that her instinct to invite Clara to the soccer game may have changed several lives for the better." The call ended, and Daniel stood in his kitchen holding his phone, letting the reality sink in. Clara had won. Not just the promotion, but vindication, justice, proof that merit could triumph over corruption when people were willing to fight for what was right. Emma thundered down the stairs, still in her dinosaur pajamas, and launched herself at Daniel with the casual violence of affection that 7-year-olds specialized in. "Morning, Dad. Can we have pancakes? The good kind. Not the healthy kind?" "We can have whatever kind you want," Daniel said, hugging her close. "It's a celebration day." "What are we celebrating?" "Miss Monroe's work problem got solved. The bad guy lost and she won." Emma's face lit up with uncomplicated joy. "That's awesome. Can we invite her over to celebrate? We could make her pancakes too." Daniel checked the time, 8:45. Clara was probably still asleep after the late night, but Emma's enthusiasm was infectious. "Let me text her and see if she's awake." He sent a message. "Emma wants to make you celebratory pancakes. Fair warning, they will be approximately 40% edible and 60% chaos. Interested?" The response came faster than he expected. "I'm interested in anything that involves not being alone right now. Give me 20 minutes?" Daniel's chest tightened at the vulnerability in those words. Clara had won her battle, achieved the goal she'd been fighting for, and her first instinct was to not be alone. That said something profound about how isolating her success had been, how much she'd sacrificed in the pursuit of excellence. "She's coming over," Daniel told Emma, "which means we need to make this kitchen presentable and figure out how to make pancakes that won't constitute a health hazard." Emma threw herself into preparation with the kind of focused intensity she usually reserved for elaborate Lego constructions. By the time Clara knocked on the door 20 minutes later, the kitchen was chaotic but functional, and Emma had appointed herself head chef despite her limited culinary credentials. Daniel opened the door to find Clara looking softer than he'd ever seen her. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, no makeup, exhaustion visible in the circles under her eyes, but something lighter in her expression. Relief, maybe? Or the beginning of genuine peace. "Hi," she said, and her smile was tentative, uncertain. "Hi yourself, come in." Daniel stepped aside and Clara entered just as Emma came barreling around the corner. "Miss Monroe, we're making pancakes. Dad says I can put chocolate chips in them if I want." "That sounds perfect," Clara said, crouching down to Emma's level with natural ease. "Can I help?" Emma's enthusiasm was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, Clara was stationed at the stove with a spatula, following Emma's very specific instructions about heat levels and flip timing, while Daniel handled the actual cooking to prevent disaster. The kitchen filled with laughter and the smell of slightly burned batter, and watching Clara relax into the chaos made Daniel's heart do complicated things he wasn't ready to examine too closely. They ate at the kitchen table, Emma chattering about her week while Clara listened with genuine attention, asking questions that indicated real interest rather than polite obligation. Daniel watched them interact and felt something settle into place. This wasn't performance anymore, wasn't strategic positioning or corporate theater. This was real connection, messy and imperfect, and absolutely right. When Emma finally ran off to play, leaving the adults alone with their coffee, Clara's expression turned serious. "Margaret called you already, didn't she?" "She did," Daniel confirmed. "Congratulations, Chief Strategy Officer Monroe. You earned it." "Did I?" Clara's voice was soft, uncertain. "Or did I just survive Richard's attack through a combination of luck and your help?" "You earned it through 15 years of exceptional work, brilliant strategy, and refusing to let corruption win," Daniel said firmly. "Richard's termination doesn't diminish your achievement. It proves the system can still recognize merit when the corruption is exposed. You did that, Clara. You stood up, you fought back, and you won." Clara's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Maybe not, but you would have found another way. You're too stubborn to let someone like Richard defeat you permanently." Daniel reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "The question now is what comes next? For you, for your career, for whatever this is between us." The board wants an answer by tomorrow about the CSO position, Clara said. It's everything I've worked for. The authority, the influence, the validation that I belong at that level. But it's also going to consume my life. More travel, longer hours, constant pressure to perform at an even higher level. I'd have even less time than I do now for anything resembling a personal life. Are you asking my permission? Daniel's tone was gentle, but direct. Because you don't need it. This is your decision, Clara. Your career, your choice. I'm not asking permission, Clara said. I'm asking if you think we can make this work. If there's a version of reality where I take this job and still have space in my life for you and Emma. Because I want both, Daniel. I want the career I've earned, but I also want this. Whatever this is that we've started building. I just don't know if it's possible to have everything. Daniel considered this seriously, his engineer's mind automatically calculating feasibility and structural integrity. I think, he said slowly, that it's possible if we're honest about expectations and limitations. Emma comes first for me, always. Your career is a massive part of who you are, and I wouldn't ask you to diminish that. But there has to be room for us too. Not as an afterthought or an obligation, but as something you actually want and make time for. I do want it, Clara said, her voice fierce with certainty. I've spent 4 days with you and Emma, and I've felt more alive, more connected, more genuinely happy than I have in years. I don't want to lose that just because I'm terrified of failing at work-life balance. Then we try, Daniel said simply. We set boundaries. We communicate honestly, and we build something sustainable rather than perfect. Some weeks you'll be traveling and we won't see you. Some nights you'll have to choose between work emergencies and Emma's school play. And that's okay, as long as we're honest about it, as long as we don't pretend limitations don't exist. Clara was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on Daniel's hand. What if I'm terrible at this? What if I get so consumed by work that I neglect you and Emma and prove everyone right who said I can't balance personal and professional life? Then we adjust, Daniel said. We're not signing a lifetime contract, Clara. We're just trying. And if trying means sometimes you work late, and sometimes we have dinner without you, and sometimes Emma's disappointed because you can't make it to a game. That's life. That's reality. As long as the effort is genuine, as long as you're actually here when you can be, we'll make it work. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's actually incredibly complicated. But it's honest, and that makes it possible. Daniel stood, pulling Clara up with him. Come on, there's something I want to show you. He led her upstairs to his home office, a small room he'd converted from what was probably supposed to be a nursery. The walls were covered with architectural drawings, project plans, photos of completed structures. Clara studied them with genuine interest, her sharp mind clearly appreciating the complexity. These are incredible, she said, pausing at a drawing of a commercial building's support structure. This is what you do? Design the bones that hold everything else up? Basically, I figure out how to make buildings stand, how to distribute weight and stress so structures can withstand pressure without collapsing. Daniel gestured to the drawings. It's all about balance, Clara. Too much weight in one place, and the whole thing becomes unstable. Not enough support where it's needed, and critical systems fail. The key is finding the right distribution, accepting that some areas will bear more load than others, but making sure nothing gets overwhelmed to the point of collapse. Understanding dawned in Clara's eyes. You're making a metaphor. I'm making an observation, Daniel corrected with a slight smile. Your life is a structure, Clara. Right now, your career is bearing most of the load because that's where you've directed all your energy and support. But structures need multiple support points to remain stable long-term. If you want to add personal life to your architecture, we need to figure out how to distribute the weight so nothing collapses. And you think that's possible? I think it's necessary, Daniel said. Because brilliance in one area doesn't prevent burnout if everything else is neglected. You've proven you can build an extraordinary career. Now the question is whether you're willing to build an extraordinary life around it. Clara stepped closer, her expression vulnerable and open in a way that made Daniel's breath catch. I want to try. I'm terrified I'll fail, but I want to try. Then that's enough, Daniel said. We start from there and figure out the rest as we go. Clara kissed him then. tentative at first, then deeper. A kiss that tasted like coffee and possibility, and the beginning of something neither of them could fully define, but both desperately wanted. When they pulled apart, Clara was smiling with genuine joy. "I should probably go home," she said reluctantly. "I need to call the board and officially accept the position, and I have about 1,000 emails to answer about last night's chaos." "Go," Daniel said. "Handle your business. But Clara, tonight come back for dinner. Nothing fancy, just the three of us. Let Emma celebrate with you properly." "I'd like that," Clara said softly. "I'd really like that." She left through the front door with her head high, purpose in her stride, and Daniel watched until she disappeared into her house. Then he headed back to the kitchen, where Emma was creating what appeared to be an elaborate fort out of couch cushions and blankets. "Is Ms. Monroe coming back?" Emma asked without looking up from her construction. "She is, for dinner tonight." "Good." Emma adjusted a pillow with critical precision. "I like when she's here. The house feels better." Daniel couldn't argue with that assessment. The house did feel better with Clara in it, fuller, warmer, more alive. He settled onto the couch to help with fort construction and let himself imagine a future where this became normal, where Clara's presence was a regular feature rather than an exceptional event. His phone buzzed throughout the afternoon. Messages from colleagues who'd heard about the gala drama, a call from his brother checking in, several texts from numbers he didn't recognize asking for comments about Richard Garrett's termination. Daniel ignored most of it, focusing instead on Emma and the simple pleasure of a Sunday with his daughter. At 4 o'clock, his phone rang with a number he did recognize. Clara, her voice tight with stress. "Daniel, I need help. Can you come over?" "What's wrong?" "Just come over, please." Daniel called Mrs. Patterson to watch Emma, then jogged the short distance to Clara's house. She opened the door before he could knock, her expression stricken. "The board called," Clara said without preamble. "They want me to start tomorrow, Monday morning, first day as CSO, full executive transition. Richard's termination left a vacuum they need filled immediately, and they want me in the role before the market opens." "Okay," Daniel said carefully. "That's fast, but it's good, right? Shows they trust you to handle the transition." "It's a disaster," Clara said, her voice rising with panic. "I'm not ready. I don't have a team in place. I don't have a strategy for the first 100 days. I don't have half the things I'd planned to prepare before taking this role. And now I have less than 24 hours to get ready for the most important position of my career while everyone watches to see if I'll fail spectacularly." Daniel recognized the spiral, panic feeding on itself, catastrophizing every challenge into an insurmountable obstacle. He'd seen it before in colleagues facing impossible deadlines, had experienced it himself in the weeks after Sarah's death when everything felt overwhelming. "Clara," he said firmly, taking her hands, "look at me. Breathe." "I can't breathe. I need to prepare. I need to Breathe first, prepare second," Daniel interrupted. "Come on. In through your nose, out through your mouth. With me." Clara followed his lead reluctantly, her breathing gradually slowing from panicked gasps to something more controlled. When her hands stopped shaking, Daniel guided her to the couch. "Okay," he said calmly. "Let's break this down structurally. What are the actual critical tasks you need to accomplish before tomorrow morning? I need a transition plan, a communication strategy, a team structure. Those are categories, not tasks," Daniel interrupted. "Be specific. What's the single most critical thing you need to have ready by 9 a.m. tomorrow?" Clara thought for a moment, her executive mind kicking back into gear. "A statement for the company-wide meeting. The CEO is announcing my appointment and Richard's termination at 9. I need to address the entire organization about my vision and priorities." "Okay, that's concrete. What else?" "I need to meet with my new direct reports and establish authority without seeming like I'm overcompensating for the controversy. I need to review the current strategic initiatives Richard was leading and determine which ones to continue or kill. I need to handle the press inquiries that are already flooding in about last night's drama." Daniel pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. "Let's make a list. Prioritize by what absolutely must happen tomorrow versus what can wait 48 hours versus what you can delegate." They spent the next 2 hours working through Clara's panic with systematic precision, breaking overwhelming chaos into manageable tasks. Daniel asked questions, challenged assumptions, helped Clara identify what was actually critical versus what was fear masquerading as necessity. By 6 o'clock, they had a clear plan, speech outline prepared, key meetings scheduled, delegation strategy identified, realistic expectations set. Clara leaned back against the couch, exhaustion visible in every line of her body, but the panic gone from her eyes. How did you do that? Do what? Take my spiral and turn it into something I can actually handle. I was completely overwhelmed, and now I feel like tomorrow might actually be survivable. That's what I do, Daniel said simply. Break complex problems into component parts and solve them systematically. Works for buildings, works for panicked executives, apparently. Clara's laugh was watery but genuine. I'm supposed to be the strategic thinker. I should be able to handle this without falling apart. You're human, Clara. Humans fall apart sometimes under pressure. The strength isn't in never struggling, it's in accepting help when you need it. Daniel checked his watch. It's 6 o'clock. You said you needed tonight to prepare, so I should go. Give you space to work. Wait, Clara said quickly. What about dinner? You said we were having dinner together tonight. That was before your timeline collapsed, Daniel said gently. You've got work to do, and that's okay. We'll celebrate another night. Clara's expression crumpled slightly, disappointment warring with obligation. I wanted tonight. I wanted normal and simple and Emma's enthusiasm and your terrible jokes. I wanted to not be the executive for just a few hours. Then don't be, Daniel said. Come over at 7, eat with us, take a break from the chaos, then go back to preparing when you need to. You'll work better with food in your system and a mental reset anyway. I shouldn't. You should, Daniel interrupted. Because balance, remember? Work is important, but so is taking care of yourself and honoring commitments to people who matter. You matter to Emma, and to me. So come to dinner. Clara held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, 7 o'clock, but I'll need to leave by 8:30 to finish preparing. That's fine. We'll take what we can get. Daniel stood, heading for the door. And Clara? You're going to be extraordinary tomorrow. Not because you're perfectly prepared, but because you're brilliant and capable, and you've already proven you can handle whatever gets thrown at you. Trust that. He left before Clara could respond, jogging back to his house where Emma was helping Mrs. Patterson make cookies with dubious success. After thanking Mrs. Patterson and sending her home, Daniel focused on dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad and garlic bread, comfort food that didn't require extensive preparation. Clara arrived at 7 o'clock exactly, and Emma's delighted greeting was worth every compromise. They ate at the kitchen table with Emma dominating conversation, and Daniel watched Clara slowly relax, the executive armor sliding away to reveal the woman underneath, who laughed at Emma's jokes and helped clear dishes without being asked. At 8:15, Clara's phone buzzed with an urgent email. She read it, her expression tightening, and Daniel recognized the shift. Work calling, pulling her back into the chaos she'd briefly escaped. You need to go, he said, not a question. I'm sorry, Clara said, already standing. There's a crisis with one of Richard's former clients threatening to pull their contract. I need to handle it tonight before it explodes tomorrow. Then handle it, Daniel said. But Clara, thank you for being here even when work was calling. That means something. Clara kissed him quickly, hugged Emma goodbye, and disappeared into the night with her phone already pressed to her ear. Emma watched her go with a disappointed expression. She had to work, Emma said, not quite a question. She did, Daniel confirmed. Her new job is really important, and sometimes important things need attention even when we'd rather be doing something else. Will she always have to leave for work? It was a perceptive question, cutting right to the heart of what Daniel had been wondering himself. Sometimes, he said honestly, but not always. And when she's here, she's really here. That counts for a lot. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to complex problems. Okay, I guess that's fair, as long as she comes back. As long as she comes back, Daniel echoed, hoping desperately that it was a promise Clara could keep. Monday morning arrived with the weight of significance. Daniel woke early, already thinking about Clara facing her first day as CSO, navigating corporate politics and media scrutiny and the pressure of proving she deserved the position she'd fought so hard to win. He sent her a text. "You've got this. Breathe, trust yourself, and remember why you earned this role. Proud of you." The response came an hour later. "Thank you. Terrified but ready. Wish me luck." Daniel wished her considerably more than luck throughout the day, checking his phone between client meetings for updates that didn't come. He understood. Clara was drowning in the chaos of transition, barely had time to breathe, let alone text her neighbor. But understanding didn't stop the small worry that gnawed at him, the fear that work had already consumed her completely, and the promise of balance was dying before it truly began. At 4 o'clock, his phone finally rang. Clara's voice was exhausted but triumphant. "I survived. Barely, but I survived. The company-wide meeting went well, the client crisis got resolved, and I didn't make any catastrophic mistakes in my first executive team meeting." "Told you," Daniel said, relief flooding through him. "You were always going to be extraordinary." "I was competent, which is different, but it's a start." Clara paused, and Daniel heard the vulnerability creeping into her voice. "Daniel, I need to tell you something. The board wants me to do a press tour. Interviews, features, public appearances to establish my leadership and reassure stakeholders after Richard's scandal. It starts tomorrow and runs for the next 2 weeks, which means long days, evening events, basically zero free time." Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Okay, that's important for your role, I understand." "I don't want you to just understand," Clara said, her voice breaking slightly. "I want you to know that I hate it. I hate that I'm choosing work over time with you and Emma again. I hate that we had one dinner together before everything exploded back into chaos. I hate that I'm already proving everyone right who said I can't balance career and personal life." "Hey," Daniel said firmly, "stop spiraling. 2 weeks is not forever. It's a sprint, not a marathon. You do what you need to do for your career and we'll be here when you come up for air. That's how this works." "Well, what if I can't come up for air? What if this is just how it is now? Constant crisis management and impossible schedules and me always choosing work because it's urgent and you're patient enough to wait?" Daniel heard the real fear underneath the question, that she was already becoming the person she didn't want to be, that success meant sacrificing everything else, that there was no sustainable middle ground. "Then we'll figure it out," Daniel said quietly. "But Clara, you need to hear something important. I'm not waiting for you to fail. I'm not sitting here keeping score of missed dinners and canceled plans so I can say, 'I told you so,' when balance proves impossible. I'm your partner in this experiment, which means I'm invested in helping you succeed at both career and personal life. But that requires honest communication from you about what you need and what's actually sustainable." "I don't know what's sustainable yet," Clara admitted. "I'm making this up as I go." "Then we make it up together," Daniel said. "And in 2 weeks, when the press tour is done and things calm down, we reassess. We look at what worked and what didn't, and we adjust. But we don't quit just because the first week is chaotic. Deal?" "Deal," Clara said, and Daniel heard the smile in her voice. "Thank you for not giving up on me already." "Not giving up on us," Daniel corrected. "There's a difference." The next 2 weeks tested that commitment in ways Daniel hadn't fully anticipated. Clara disappeared into the demands of her new role almost completely. Early mornings, late nights, weekend events, constant crisis management. She texted when she could, called briefly during stolen moments, but her physical presence in Daniel's life became almost non-existent. Emma noticed, asking periodically when Miss Monroe was coming over, accepting Daniel's explanations with the patience of a child who'd learned early that adults had responsibilities that sometimes took priority. Daniel noticed, too, feeling Clara's absence in the quiet evenings and the dinners he cooked for 2 instead of 3. But he also noticed the texts that came at odd hours, Clara sharing something funny that happened at work, asking his advice on a difficult decision, sending photos from business events with captions like, "Wish you were here to make this less boring." She was trying, maintaining connection even when time was impossible, and that effort mattered more than Daniel had expected. On Friday of the second week, Clara called at 9 p.m., her voice rough with exhaustion. "I'm outside your house. Can I come in? I know it's late, but I just finished the last press event, and I need to see you before I collapse." Daniel opened the door to find Clara in full executive regalia, designer suit, perfect makeup, the armor of corporate success. But underneath it all, she looked completely shattered. "Emma's asleep," Daniel said quietly. "But come in. You look like you're about to fall over." Clara stumbled inside, kicking off her heels with a groan of relief. 2 weeks! I've been CSO for 2 weeks and I feel like I've aged 10 years. How do people sustain this? "They don't," Daniel said bluntly. "Or they burn out and pretend they're fine until something breaks catastrophically. Come on, sit down." He guided Clara to the couch, and she collapsed onto it with the boneless exhaustion of someone who'd pushed past all reasonable limits. Daniel disappeared into the kitchen, returning with water and the leftover pasta from dinner. "Eat," he ordered. "When's the last time you had actual food?" "Breakfast, maybe? There was a working lunch, but I don't think protein bars count." Clara accepted the plate and ate mechanically, too tired to taste anything but clearly desperate for fuel. Daniel sat beside her, close but not crowding, and waited. When Clara finally set down the empty plate, she turned to him with eyes bright with tears. "I'm failing," she said flatly. "I'm succeeding spectacularly at work. The board is thrilled, the press coverage is positive. I'm establishing authority and vision and everything I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm completely failing at life. I've barely seen you. I haven't seen Emma at all. I'm working 16-hour days and it's still not enough. I don't know how to do this, Daniel. I don't know how to be the executive they need and the person you deserve." "Maybe you don't have to be both perfectly," Daniel said gently. "Maybe you just have to be honest about the limitations and let the people who care about you help carry some of the weight." "I don't know how to ask for help." "You're doing it right now," Daniel pointed out. "You showed up at my door at 9 p.m. looking like you're about to shatter. That's asking for help without words, so let me help. What do you need?" Clara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was small and vulnerable. "I need to not be the CSO for a few hours. I need to just be Clara, regular person who's allowed to be tired and overwhelmed and not have all the answers. Can I stay tonight? Just sleep on your couch or in the guest room, somewhere that's not my empty house where work is always calling?" "You can stay," Daniel said, "but not on the couch. Guest room, and I'll make sure you actually sleep instead of checking email at 3 a.m. Clara's laugh was watery. "You know me too well already." "I'm learning," Daniel corrected. He stood, offering his hand. "Come on, let's get you settled before you fall asleep sitting up." He led Clara upstairs to the guest room he'd cleared for her that first chaotic night 2 weeks ago. The room was still sparse, but he'd added touches since then. Fresh flowers on the dresser, new linens, little details that said someone was expected and welcome. Clara noticed her expression softening. "You prepared this for me. I was hoping you'd need it eventually," Daniel admitted. "You work too hard to sustain that pace indefinitely. Figured you'd need a refuge at some point." "It's perfect," Clara said quietly. She turned to Daniel, vulnerable and open. "Thank you for not giving up on me during these insane weeks, for understanding when I disappeared into work, for being exactly what I needed even when I couldn't articulate it." "That's what partnership looks like," Daniel said simply. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's Saturday, no work emergencies allowed. You're spending the day with me and Emma doing absolutely nothing productive." "I can't just take a day off." "You can and you will," Daniel interrupted firmly. "The company survived before you were CSO. It'll survive if you take one Saturday to remember what life outside work looks like. This isn't negotiable, Clara. You're running yourself into the ground, and that helps no one." Clara looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. "Okay, one day, but I'll need to check emails. 1 hour in the morning, that's it. The rest of the day is ours." Daniel kissed her forehead gently. "Sleep now. Everything else can wait." He left Clara in the guest room and headed to bed himself, but sleep was elusive. He lay awake thinking about sustainable balance and impossible expectations, and whether what they were building could survive the relentless demands of Clara's career. There were no easy answers, only the commitment to keep trying and the hope that effort would be enough. Saturday morning arrived with Emma's delighted discovery that Ms. Monroe was sleeping in the guest room. Her excited whispers woke Daniel at 7, and he found her hovering outside Clara's door like a puppy waiting for its owner. "Let her sleep, monkey. She's really tired from work." "But it's Saturday. We could do fun things." We will, Daniel promised. But first, breakfast. Quietly. They made pancakes together, more successfully than Clara's first attempt, and the smell must have woken her because she appeared in the kitchen doorway at 8:30, still wearing yesterday's clothes, but looking marginally more human. "Good morning," she said, her voice rough with sleep. "Something smells incredible." Emma lit up like a supernova. "Ms. Monroe, you stayed over. Are you going to stay all day? Dad says we can do fun things." "I'd love to stay all day," Clara said, and the genuine pleasure in her voice made Daniel's chest tight. "What kind of fun things?" Emma's enthusiasm was immediate and comprehensive. The park, the library, maybe ice cream, definitely the playground, possibly the science museum if there was time. Clara listened with patient attention, and Daniel watched something remarkable happen. The executive armor stripped completely away, leaving just Clara, regular person who was allowed to want simple pleasures and uncomplicated joy. They spent the day doing exactly nothing productive. The park where Emma played on swings while Daniel and Clara sat on a bench talking about everything except work. The library where Emma checked out approximately 15 books and Clara browsed the fiction section with the kind of leisure she probably hadn't experienced in years. Ice cream at the shop downtown where Emma got chocolate everywhere and Clara laughed with unself-conscious delight. By late afternoon, they were back at Daniel's house, sprawled in the living room in comfortable exhaustion. Emma was reading one of her library books. Clara was half asleep against Daniel's shoulder, and the house felt full in exactly the right way. "This is nice," Clara murmured, her voice drowsy. "I'd forgotten what nice feels like without agenda or obligation attached." "Get used to it," Daniel said quietly, "because this is what balance looks like. Not perfect, not constant, but real when it happens." Clara tilted her head to look at him, her eyes serious despite the exhaustion. "I want this to work, Daniel. Not just the trying part, but the actual succeeding part. I want to build a life that includes my career and you and Emma and moments like this that remind me why any of it matters." "Then we'll build it," Daniel said simply. "One day at a time, one choice at a time, one commitment to showing up when it counts." Emma looked up from her book. "Are you guys talking about grown-up stuff?" "Sort of," Daniel admitted. "Why?" "Because I want Miss Monroe to stay," Emma said, with the blunt honesty children excelled at. "Not just visiting sometimes, but like really stay. Is that okay to want?" Clara's breath caught, and Daniel felt her tense beside him. This was the question they'd been dancing around for 2 weeks. What did trying actually mean in concrete terms? What were they building toward? "It's absolutely okay to want that," Clara said carefully. "But Emma, you need to understand that my work is really demanding. There will be times when I can't be here as much as I want to be. Times when I have to choose work because it's important. Would that be okay with you?" Emma considered this with the gravity she brought to important decisions. "As long as you come back," she said finally. "That's what matters. Not if you're here all the time, but that you always come back." The simple wisdom of a 7-year-old cut through all the complicated adult anxieties and laid bare the essential truth. Presence mattered, but consistency mattered more. Being there when possible counted more than being there always. "I can promise that," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "I can promise I'll always come back." "Okay then," Emma said, returning to her book like she'd just solved world peace. "You can stay." Daniel met Clara's eyes over Emma's head, and something passed between them. Understanding, commitment, the beginning of real partnership built on truth rather than performance. This wouldn't be easy. Clara's career would always demand more than seemed reasonable. Daniel's priority would always be Emma, and there would be conflicts and compromises and moments when balance felt impossible. But they would try. They would choose each other when they could, communicate honestly when they couldn't, and build something sustainable through intention rather than hoping for perfection. "I should go home soon," Clara said reluctantly. "I've been in these clothes for 24 hours and I really need a shower." "Go," Daniel said, "but come back for dinner. We're grilling burgers and Emma makes a mean potato salad." "I do," Emma confirmed proudly. "It has pickles." Clara laughed, the sound genuine and full. "How can I resist potato salad with pickles? I'll be back at 6. She left through the front door with a lightness in her step that hadn't been there yesterday, and Daniel watched until she disappeared into her house. Then he turned to find Emma watching him with knowing eyes. "You really like her," Emma observed. "I really do," Daniel admitted. "Good, because I think she really likes you too, and me. We're a package deal." "We absolutely are," Daniel agreed, pulling Emma into a hug. "The best package deal in the neighborhood." Claire returned at 6 o'clock exactly, showered and changed into jeans and a t-shirt that probably cost more than Daniel's entire casual wardrobe but looked wonderfully normal. They grilled burgers in the backyard while Emma demonstrated her potato salad technique with the kind of precise instructions usually reserved for complex scientific procedures. After dinner, as the sun began to set and Emma chased fireflies in the yard, Clara took Daniel's hand. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about what sustainable actually looks like, and I think I need to make some changes." "What kind of changes?" "I'm going to hire a chief of staff, someone to manage my schedule, filter requests, help me prioritize so I'm not drowning in minutiae. And I'm going to establish boundaries. No work emails after 8 p.m. Unless it's genuinely catastrophic, no weekend events more than once a month. Actual vacation time that I actually take." Clara's voice was determined. "I've proven I can do the job. Now I need to prove I can do it sustainably." "That sounds healthy," Daniel said carefully, "but it also sounds like it'll meet resistance from people who expect you to be always available." "Let them resist," Clara said firmly. "I've spent 15 years proving I'm willing to sacrifice everything for work. Maybe it's time to prove that real leadership includes modeling healthy boundaries instead of martyrdom." Daniel pulled her closer, impressed and proud, and maybe a little in love, though he wasn't quite ready to name that feeling yet. "I think you're going to change corporate culture one boundary at a time." "I think I'm going to try," Clara corrected, "and fail sometimes, and adjust, and try again, but I'm done pretending that working myself to death is the only way to succeed." Emma ran over, breathless and grass-stained, holding something cupped in her hands. "Look, I caught a firefly." "Miss Monroe, did you ever catch fireflies when you were little?" "I didn't," Clara admitted. "I was too busy with piano practice and academic competitions. I think I missed a lot of childhood being excellent." "You can catch fireflies now," Emma said simply, offering her cupped hands. "It's not too late." Clara accepted the offering with the kind of reverence usually reserved for precious gifts, and when she opened her hands to release the firefly, watching it glow and disappear into the darkening sky, her expression was pure wonder. "Thank you, Emma," she said softly, "for showing me it's not too late." They stayed outside until full darkness, watching fireflies and talking about nothing important, and Daniel felt something settle in his chest that he recognized as hope. This could work. This strange arrangement between a widowed engineer, his perceptive daughter, and a brilliant executive learning to build a life instead of just a career. It could actually work. Not perfectly. Not without challenges and conflicts and moments of doubt, but genuinely, honestly, sustainably work. 2 months later, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, Clara showed up at Daniel's door with a single red rose and an expression that was equal parts nervous and determined. "I have something to ask you," she said without preamble. Daniel opened the door wider, gesturing her inside. "Okay. Should I be worried?" "Maybe. Probably not. I don't know." Clara took a breath, centering herself. "I've been thinking about what we talked about building something sustainable. And I realize that I've been treating this house, your house, like a refuge I visit when I need to remember how to be human. But I want more than that." "What do you want?" "I want to stop visiting," Clara said, her voice gaining strength. "I want to be part of this. Not a guest, not someone who shows up for dinner and leaves before Emma's bedtime, but an actual partner in building a life together. I want mornings where I help make Emma's lunch, and evenings where I'm just here, present, part of the family rhythm instead of an occasional addition to it." Daniel's heart was pounding, hope and fear warring in equal measure. "Clara, are you asking to move in?" "Eventually, yes. Not immediately. I know that's too fast. Emma needs time to adjust. We need to figure out logistics. But I'm asking if you're open to the possibility. If you can see a future where this stops being two separate houses and starts being one shared home. Daniel thought about the past 2 months, Clara establishing boundaries at work and mostly keeping them. Weekly dinners that became a standing tradition. Emma's soccer games where Clara showed up in business attire straight from the office, cheering loudly and badly. Quiet evenings where they worked side by side. Daniel on project plans, Clara on strategy documents, comfortable in shared silence. It hadn't been perfect. Clara had missed dinners when crises erupted. Daniel had gotten frustrated when work consumed her attention during promised quality time. Emma had been disappointed when Clara's travel schedule conflicted with school events. But they'd communicated through the conflicts, adjusted expectations, and kept choosing each other even when it was difficult. "I can see that future," Daniel said quietly. "I want that future. But Emma gets a vote too. This is her home, her stability. We need her blessing before we make any concrete plans." "Of course," Clara agreed immediately. "I wouldn't want it any other way." They called Emma downstairs, and she appeared with the slightly wary expression of a child who'd learned that serious adult conversations could go either way. "What's going on?" Emma asked, settling onto the couch between them. Clara took Emma's hand, her voice gentle and honest. "Emma, I want to ask you something important, and I need you to be completely honest about how you feel. Is that okay?" "Okay," Emma said cautiously. "I've been spending a lot of time here with you and your dad over the past few months, and I've realized that I'm happiest when I'm here, with both of you. So I wanted to ask if maybe, eventually, when it feels right, would you be okay with me living here? Not as a visitor, but as part of your family." Emma's eyes went wide. "Like, moving in? All your stuff and everything?" "All my stuff and everything," Clara confirmed. "But only if you're comfortable with it. This is your home, Emma, your safe space. I would never want to invade that without your permission." Emma was quiet for a long moment, her young face serious as she processed this enormous question. Daniel held his breath, trying not to influence her decision while desperately hoping she'd say yes. "Would you still have to work a lot?" Emma asked finally. "Yes," Clara said honestly. "My job is really demanding, and there will be times when I can't be here as much as I want, but I promise I'll always come back. And when I'm here, I'll really be here, not distracted by work, but actually present with you and your dad." "And you wouldn't try to replace my mom?" Emma's voice was small, vulnerable. "Because I don't remember her much, but she's still my mom." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Never. Your mom was special and important, and she'll always be your mom. I'm not trying to replace her, Emma. I'm just hoping to be someone else who cares about you and wants to be part of your life. Is that okay?" Emma studied Clara with that unnerving perception children sometimes had. "Do you love my dad?" Clara glanced at Daniel, her expression vulnerable and open. "I do," she said softly. "Very much. And do you love me?" "I do," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're brilliant and funny, and you've taught me so much about what actually matters. I love you, Emma." Emma nodded, satisfied. "Okay, then you can move in. But I get to help you unpack, and you have to come to all my soccer games, even the boring ones. And you have to learn how to make pancakes the right way without burning them." Clara laughed through tears. "Deal. All of those things. I promise." Emma launched herself at Clara, hugging her with the unself-conscious affection of childhood, and Daniel watched his daughter and the woman he loved embrace and felt his heart crack open with joy so fierce it almost hurt. That night, after Emma was asleep and Clara had gone home to her empty house that wouldn't be hers much longer, Daniel stood in his living room and looked at the space with new eyes. This house that had felt so quiet after Sarah died, so full of absence and grief and single-parent survival, it was becoming something else. Something full of laughter and connection and the messy beauty of chosen family. His phone buzzed, a message from Clara. "Thank you for giving me a chance to build something real, for showing me that success doesn't require sacrifice of everything else, for being exactly what I needed even when I didn't know I needed it. I love you," Daniel typed back. "I love you too. Welcome home." 3 months later, on a Saturday morning that felt almost perfect, Clara officially moved in. Not all at once. She kept her house for another 6 months, maintaining the option to retreat if the experiment failed catastrophically. But her clothes appeared in Daniel's closet, her toiletries in the bathroom, her books on the shelves alongside his engineering texts and Emma's children's literature. The transition wasn't seamless. They fought about closet space and decorating choices and whose turn it was to handle Emma's school pickup when work schedules conflicted. Clara struggled with the constant presence of another person after years of solitary living. Daniel struggled with sharing decisions he'd made alone for 4 years. Emma struggled with adjusting to a new family dynamic and occasionally resented Clara's presence in space that had been just father and daughter. But they worked through it. They communicated, compromised, and committed to choosing each other even when it was hard. Clara hired that chief of staff and enforced her boundaries ruthlessly, carving out time for family that was sacred and inviolable. Daniel learned to ask for help instead of carrying everything himself. Emma learned that love wasn't finite. Loving Clara didn't diminish love for her absent mother, and having Clara in her life made it fuller rather than replacing what was lost. 1 year after Clara had knocked on Daniel's door in the rain, desperate and determined, they were a family. Imperfect, complicated, built on honesty rather than performance, and absolutely worth every struggle. On the anniversary of that rainy night, Daniel woke to find Clara already up, coffee made, sitting at the kitchen table with that same leather portfolio she'd brought to their first practice session. "Please tell me you're not working on our anniversary," Daniel said, only half joking. "Not working," Clara said, looking up with a smile that made his breath catch, even after a year. "Planning." "Planning what?" "Our future. I've been thinking about the past year, everything we've built, everything we've learned, everything that's worked and what hasn't, and I realized I want to make some changes." Daniel felt a flutter of anxiety. "What kind of changes?" Clara pulled out a document and slid it across the table. "I'm stepping down as CSO." The words didn't make sense. Daniel read them again, trying to process. "What? Why? You've been incredible in that role. The company's thriving, the board loves you, you've revolutionized their strategic approach." "And I've proven everything I needed to prove," Clara interrupted gently. "I can do the job. I can do it brilliantly. But I don't want to do it for the next 20 years at the expense of everything else. So I'm transitioning to a senior advisory role, part-time, flexible schedule, still meaningful work, but not all-consuming." "Clara, you don't have to sacrifice your career for us." "I'm not sacrificing," Clara said firmly. "I'm choosing. There's a difference. I spent 15 years building a career that left no room for anything else. Now I want to build a life that includes meaningful work and family and time to actually exist outside of performance and achievement. That's not sacrifice, Daniel. That's evolution." Daniel studied her, looking for signs of resentment or regret, but found only certainty. "You're sure about this?" "Completely. I've spent the past year learning what actually makes me happy. And it's not just professional success. It's Saturday mornings with Emma teaching me pancake techniques. It's evenings helping you with project calculations, even though I don't fully understand engineering math. It's being here, present, part of something bigger than my resume." Claire took his hand. "I'm not giving up ambition. I'm redirecting it toward building something that lasts." "What does Emma think?" "She doesn't know yet. I wanted to tell you first." Clara's smile was soft. "But I think she'll be happy. She keeps asking when I'll be able to come on field trips and volunteer at school and do the things other kids' parents do. Now I actually can." Daniel pulled Clara into his arms, overwhelmed with love and gratitude and awe at her courage to choose something different than the path she'd been running for 15 years. "I'm so proud of you for knowing what you want and having the strength to pursue it, even when it means letting go of what you fought for." "I fought for the wrong things," Clara said quietly. "Or the right things in isolation. Now I'm fighting for balance, for wholeness, for a life that's measured in connections instead of achievements." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the morning light, and Daniel felt the shift of something fundamental falling into place. This was what they'd been building toward. Not Clara conforming to his life or Daniel accommodating her career, but both of them choosing something new together. Emma thundered down the stairs, still in pajamas, and stopped short when she saw them. "Are you guys being mushy again?" "Extremely mushy," Daniel confirmed. "Clara has news." Clara crouched down to Emma's level, her expression open and honest. I'm changing jobs, moving to part-time work that gives me more time to be here with you and your dad. What do you think? Emma's face lit up with uncomplicated joy. Does that mean you can come to the science fair and the winter concert and help with my book report about dinosaurs? All of those things, Clara promised. Every single one. Emma threw herself at Clara with the force of absolute delight, and Daniel watched his daughter and the woman he loved embrace and felt complete in a way he hadn't experienced since Sarah died. This wasn't replacement of what was lost. It was building something new on foundations of grief and healing and the courage to try again. 6 months later, Clara sold her house and made Daniel's home officially theirs. They renovated the master bedroom, turned Clara's old home office into a proper guest room, and created a study where they could work side by side on evenings when both had projects demanding attention. Emma adjusted to being part of a two-parent household with the resilience of childhood, occasionally testing boundaries but mostly reveling in the expanded love and attention. Clara learned to navigate elementary school politics and soccer mom dynamics with the same strategic brilliance she'd brought to corporate boardrooms. Daniel learned to share responsibility and accept help and trust that his daughter was safe and loved even when he wasn't solely in charge. 2 years after that rainy night, on Emma's 10th birthday, Daniel found Clara sitting on the back porch watching the party preparations with an expression of profound contentment. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling beside her. "How different my life is from what I planned," Clara said simply. 2 years ago, I thought success meant a corner office and executive authority, and the respect that came from professional achievement. I thought personal life was optional, something other people needed, but I could do without. And now? Now I know I was wrong about almost everything, Clara said with a slight laugh. Success isn't a title or a salary, it's Emma's laughter when we make terrible jokes. It's Saturday mornings where we don't schedule anything and just exist together. It's you bringing me coffee exactly how I like it without me having to ask. It's building something that matters more than any strategic initiative ever could. Daniel took her hand, lacing their fingers together in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. No regrets? About stepping back from the CSO role? None. About finding you and Emma and this life we've built? Not even for a second. Clara turned to him, her eyes bright with emotion. You saved me, Daniel, not from Richard. I could have survived his attack eventually. You saved me from a life of hollow achievement and isolation disguised as success. You showed me what actually matters. You saved yourself, Daniel corrected gently. You chose to try something different. You chose to open your door when I knocked, metaphorically and literally. You chose to build something real instead of performing something perfect. That was all you. We saved each other then, Clara said, and it felt like truth. Two lonely people who learned that connection was worth the risk of vulnerability. Emma called from inside, cake time, present opening, the beautiful chaos of childhood celebration. Daniel and Clara stood together, hands linked, and walked inside to join their daughter in marking another year of growth and joy and life lived fully instead of just survived. That night, after Emma was asleep and the house was clean, and they were alone in their shared bedroom, Clara turned to Daniel with an expression he'd learned to recognize, vulnerable but determined, scared but committed. I want to ask you something, she said, and I need you to be completely honest. Always, Daniel promised. Do you think we should get married? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with significance and possibility. Daniel thought about the past 2 years, about rainy nights and corporate warfare, and building something real from the ashes of loneliness. He thought about Emma's easy acceptance of Clara as family, about shared mornings and integrated lives and the deep comfort of partnership. Yes, he said simply. I think we should get married. Not because we have to prove anything or because it changes what we've already built, but because I want the world to know you're my family, officially, legally, permanently. I want to stand up in front of everyone we know and promise to keep choosing you for the rest of my life. Clara's smile was radiant through tears. I was hoping you'd say that, because I want the same thing. I want to be Emma's family, not just in practice, but in name. I want to promise publicly that I'm all in on this life we've built. I want to choose you every day and have that choice witnessed and celebrated." "Is this a proposal?" Daniel asked, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I think it is," Clara said with a laugh. "Not very romantic, is it? No ring? No plan? Just a question asked in our bedroom on a Tuesday night." "It's perfect," Daniel said, pulling her close. "Because it's honest and real and exactly us. So yes, Clara Monroe, I will absolutely marry you." They married 6 months later in Daniel's backyard. Emma's backyard now, really, the space where she'd played and grown and learned what family could look like when built on intention rather than biology. The ceremony was small, intimate, attended by people who mattered rather than professional obligations. Margaret Chen officiated, her voice warm as she spoke about courage and choice and building lives that reflected values rather than expectations. Emma stood between them as they exchanged vows, her hands held by both adults, physically connecting the family they'd become. Clara promised to honor Sarah's memory while building something new. Daniel promised to support Clara's evolution and growth, even when it meant change and adjustment. Both promised Emma that she would always be at the center of their family, loved and protected, and given space to become whoever she was meant to be. When it was over, when the vows were spoken, and the simple gold bands exchanged, and the kiss shared to enthusiastic applause from their small gathering, Daniel looked at his wife and daughter and felt complete in ways he'd stopped believing were possible. This was what mattered, not corporate titles or professional achievement or the respect of strangers. Family, built intentionally. Love, chosen daily. Lives integrated through honest effort and the willingness to be vulnerable. 5 years after Clara had knocked on his door in the rain, Daniel stood in his backyard, their backyard, and watched his wife help their daughter prepare for her first middle school dance. Clara was laughing at Emma's anxiety about what to wear, offering gentle guidance while respecting Emma's autonomy, and the easy comfort between them was beautiful to witness. "Dad," Emma called, "come settle this. Clara says the blue dress is more age-appropriate, but I want the one with the sparkles." Daniel joined them, taking in the scene with paternal amusement. "Why not both? Blue dress with sparkly accessories?" "That's actually brilliant," Clara said, shooting him a grateful look. "Compromise and everyone wins." Emma considered this, then nodded. "Okay, but I'm wearing the sparkly shoes too." "Deal," Daniel agreed, and Emma ran off to try the combination. Clara leaned into Daniel's side, comfortable and close. "We're doing okay at this parenting thing, aren't we?" "Better than okay," Daniel said. "We're doing great. Emma's happy, well-adjusted, thriving in school and friendships and activities. We're communicating well, setting reasonable boundaries, giving her space to grow while maintaining presence and support." "I never thought I'd be good at this," Clara admitted. "The domestic life, the parenting partnership, the prioritization of family over professional identity. But it turns out I love it. I love being Emma's parent. I love being your partner. I love the life we've built more than any achievement I accumulated in my previous existence." "No regrets about the career you left behind?" "None. I still do meaningful work. The advisory role keeps me intellectually engaged and professionally relevant. But it doesn't consume me. It doesn't define me. I'm so much more than my resume now." Clara smiled up at him. "I'm a wife, a parent, a friend, a person who exists in multiple dimensions instead of just one. That's success, Daniel. Real success." Emma emerged in the blue dress with strategic sparkles, looking both nervous and excited. "How do I look?" "Beautiful," Clara and Daniel said in unison. "Completely age-appropriate with just enough sparkle to feel special," Clara added. "Perfect." Emma grinned, then surprised both adults by hugging them simultaneously. "Thanks for helping. And for being good at the parent thing. I know it's not always easy." "Worth every challenge," Daniel said, kissing the top of her head. "Absolutely worth it," Clara agreed. They walked Emma to the school dance together, watched her disappear into the chaos of preteens trying to look sophisticated while still fundamentally being children, and then headed home hand in hand. "Remember when you knocked on my door in the rain?" Daniel said as they walked. "How could I forget?" Clara laughed. "I was so desperate, so convinced that one photograph could destroy everything I'd worked for. I thought I needed to manufacture an image to save my career. Instead, you found a family. Instead, I found everything that actually matters, Clara corrected. Career preservation turned into life transformation. Fake relationship became real partnership. Strategic positioning became genuine love. They reached home, the house that had evolved from Daniel's refuge into their shared sanctuary, and settled on the front porch to wait for Emma's dance to end. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, the neighborhood quiet and peaceful. If you could go back, Clara said thoughtfully, to that rainy night 2 years ago, would you change anything? Daniel considered this seriously. I'd maybe warned myself that agreeing to help would completely transform my life, that the quiet, single-parent existence I'd built would explode into chaos and corporate warfare and eventually evolve into something more beautiful than I could have imagined. But change it? No, not a single moment. Even the scary parts? The confrontation with Richard, the risk to Emma, the uncertainty of whether we could make this work. Especially those parts, Daniel said firmly, because they're what made us real. If it had been easy, if there'd been no risk or challenge or moments of doubt, we might have built something comfortable but ultimately shallow. The struggle is what gave us depth. Clara rested her head on his shoulder, comfortable and close. I love you, Daniel Reed, for your integrity, your patience, your willingness to see me as I actually am instead of the image I projected, for showing me what life could be when built on truth instead of performance. I love you too, Clara Reed, Daniel said, still slightly awed by how natural the shared name sounded. For your courage, your brilliance, your capacity to evolve and grow even when it meant letting go of everything you thought defined you. For choosing us every day, even when it's hard. They sat like that for a long time, watching stars appear and thinking about the improbable journey that had brought them from desperate neighbors to permanent partners. The house behind them held evidence of their integrated lives. Emma's artwork, Clara's books, Daniel's project plans, the beautiful chaos of family accumulated organically over years of intentional building. This was success, Daniel thought, not measured in promotions or achievements or professional accolades, but in moments of peace on a front porch with someone you loved, in a daughter thriving because she was surrounded by adults who chose her happiness daily, in a life built brick by brick on foundations of honesty, communication, and the courage to keep trying even when perfection was impossible. The rain had stopped years ago, but what it had washed into his life remained, challenging, transforming, and ultimately blessing him in ways he'd never imagined possible. Clara Monroe had knocked on his door desperate for help. Instead, she'd given him everything he'd stopped believing he could have. And that, Daniel thought as he held his wife close under the emerging stars, was the best kind of story. One that started in chaos, survived through struggle, and ended not with perfection, but with something infinitely better, real, honest, chosen love that would last not because it was easy, but because both people committed to making it work. Forever.